Chapter 801. After chatting with Ban's Ho for a while, Ten Xiu found that the man had become more mature and steady in the past year. After praising him and carefully exhorting him, Tang Xiu let Ban's Ho leave. Grand Master, do you want to go to Clam Island? Gu Xiaoxue stood at Tang Xiu's side. The corner of her mouth was outlined on her devastatingly beautiful face, revealing an intoxicating smile. After pondering for a moment, Ten Xiu slowly nodded and said, "Since we've arrived at Jingmen Island and it's not too far from Clam Island, let's go there." "Auntie, do you want to go with me?" Tang Min wanted to see the results of Tan Xiu's establishment of the Cultivator Legion, so she replied without hesitation, "I'll go with you." Early morning the next day. A passenger ship docked at the newly built port of Clam Island. Just as Tan Xiu, Tang Min, and Gu Xiaoxue came out of the cabin, they saw more than a dozen stalwart men standing guard at the port. One of them even strode toward them. His expression slightly changed when he saw Tan Xiu and Gu Xiaoxue. His expression turned particularly fanatical as he greeted respectfully, "Boss." Tan Xiu nodded with a smile and asked, "Who's in charge of Clam Island now?" "It's Yuan Yi," answered the man. Tan Xiu nodded and asked again, "How's the construction of Clam Island? Where are the children being settled?" "The construction is still in progress, and it's difficult to see the results in a short time," answered the man. "As for the children, they are all in the southern peninsula. It's a restricted area that even we don't have the right to enter." "All right, I'll go to the southern peninsula to take a look," said Tan Xiu. "Understood." The man nodded respectfully and quietly retreated to the side. Tan Xiu took Tang Min and didn't fly there. Clam Island was currently under construction, so they slowly approached the southern peninsula along the coastline. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two ghostly figures silently sprang out from the thicket. Along with a looming killing intent, two stalwart men appeared in front of Tan Xiu's group. Presumptuous! Gu Xiaoxue took a step forward and berated in a deep voice. When the two strong men saw that it was Tan Xiu and Gu Xiaoxue, the murderous aura they emitted instantly disappeared without a trace. Their expressions became somewhat frightened and they hastily saluted respectfully. Tan Xiu waved his hand and lightly smiled, "It's their duty. Don't blame them. Inform Yuan Yi to immediately gather all the children. I need to see them." "Yes." One of them answered and instantly disappeared on the spot. The other person quickly led Tan Xiu and the others into the forest and approached a wall that was 2 to 3 meters tall. They jumped over the wall and entered a wide area. On this flat ground, there were many 1-meter-tall bluestones. They were so densely packed that it was impossible to count how many there were. A few minutes later, Yuan Yi, who was wearing a black exercise suit and had his long hair tied with a rope, sprinted to the front of Tan Xiu and the others as fast as he could and respectfully called out, "Boss." Tan Xiu nodded and said with a smile, "You are Yuan Yi? What's your current cultivation level?" "Middle stage of foundation establishment," answered Yuan Yi. "Not bad, but you need to keep working hard." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "You must have a high status in the Everlasting Feast Hall since you can be assigned here. According to the reward rules, the first 10 cultivators to break through to the Golden Core stage will be rewarded handsomely. Work hard and strive to be one of the top 10. Yuan Ye's eyes gleamed as he firmly said, "This subordinate will definitely do his best." Tan Xiu flicked a spirit amassing pill and lightly smiled, "Don't tell others that I'm giving you special treatment. Just work hard. Whether you can become my right-hand man in the future or be stepped on by others, it all depends on your own efforts." "Thank you, boss. I will." Yuan Yi was a bit excited. It must be noted that the Everlasting Feast Hall's medicinal pills were very important cultivation resources, and it was not easy to get one. 10 minutes later, Tan Xiu finally knew the reason for the large number of bluestones placed in this spacious area. Silhouettes came from the direction of the short buildings in the north. Like a long dragon, groups of skinny and small children, under the lead of dozens of strong men, quickly ran through the neatly arranged bluestones. They seemed to know which bluestone belonged to them as they climbed up the bluestone and stood straight with their heads held high. Tan Xiu's spiritual sense swept over and was surprised to find a total of 62,200 bluestones, with a child standing on each bluestone. Interesting. Through his spiritual sense, Tan Xiu found that there were dozens of children less than 3 years old, escorted by the stalwart men and placed them on the bluestones. All the children are here, boss, said Yuan Yi respectfully. Tan Xiu nodded in response. As he lifted his feet, the 62,200 children looked at him as if he was walking on a flight of stairs. He walked higher and higher in the air and finally arrived in front of the first row of bluestones in the north. Standing tens of meters in the air, Tan Xiu looked around and nodded with satisfaction. Some of you know who I am, and some don't. But I'll introduce myself to you now. I hope you'll remember me and keep me firmly in your hearts. I'm Tan Xiu, the boss who provides you with food and clothing, as well as your living and learning. From today onward, you'll only address me with one word, boss. From today onward, remember my name, remember my identity, and remember the most important thing. I, Tan Xiu, will be the only person you'll be loyal to in this life. While speaking, Tan Xiu quietly released his own aura. Although it was only a weak oppressive aura, it still made the 62,200 children's faces change. What they didn't know was that Tan Xiu had used some special means to deeply engrave his image in the hearts of these children. Soul imprint technique. It was an extremely common technique in the immortal world, but it was very useful in subduing subordinates. Half a minute later, Tan Xiu retracted his aura and nodded with satisfaction. Take them back, Yuan Yi. I'll leave them to you to take care of later. Whether it's their living, learning, or cultivation, they must progress according to the current military academy's management model. If you don't understand the military academy's management model, I can ask Wolfhead to come back from Nine Dragons Island to help you. Yuan Yi floated over and respectfully said, I know the training model of the world's armies, boss, but I don't know much about the military academy's management model. I'll inform Wolfhead to come and help you for the time being, said Tan Xiu. Yuan Yi replied and then began to issue orders. The 62,200 children were immediately taken back by the dozens of big men. Tang Min looked up at Tan Xiu, who was hovering in the air. Her eyes were full of splendor. Everyone had fantasized about having a pair of wings and being able to fly freely in the sky like a bird. Even though Tang Min now had a very high status, she had also fantasized about it countless times. I must cultivate. I must become a powerful martial cultivator. Tang Min's recent experiences and knowledge had constantly changed her state of mind. Looking at Tan Xiu's stalwart figure, she clenched her fists and secretly made up her mind. 2 days later, Tan Xiu stayed here to contact the children and understand their problems. Using both carrot and stick, the children had a deeper impression of him. At the same time, Tan Xiu also met the 5 children, Tang Jin, Tang Mu, Tang Shui, Tang Hua, and Tang Tuesday. To his surprise, these 5 children were able to sense qi and could even control the qi flow inside their bodies. They were at the first or second stage of qi refining. Speak. Are there any unsolved problems in training these children here? Before leaving, Tan Xiu looked at Cheng Yi and asked with a smile. There are 3 problems in total, said Cheng Yi. First, the identity of these children is highly confidential, so ordinary people have no way to get in touch with them. Especially those young children, there are dozens of them who still need to drink milk. Although we have dozens of people here, it's too much of a headache to be a father and a mother. Tan Xiu thought for a moment and slowly nodded. We can temporarily send those under the age of 3 to a nearby place and then hire some good-natured nannies to take care of them. Second, we have a serious shortage of logistical supplies. Cheng Yi nodded and said, we're almost unable to support the food supply for more than 60,000 children. The problem of feeding more than 60,000 children is that even if some food is sent over, the rate of consumption is too fast. That's easy to handle, said Tan Xiu. Xiaoxue, after you go back, send some people to set up a logistical supply fleet to transport living supplies here. Understood. Gu Xiaoxue nodded. Boss, we only have dozens of instructors here, said Qingyi again. It's really difficult to train the children according to the military management model. Can you send another group of people here? It's not a problem to send some people here. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, but the most important problem now is that our everlasting feast hall has too few core members. Once we send outsiders here, our most secretive plan will face the danger of being leaked. Qingyi spread his hands and said, then what about here? Tan Xiu raised his hand and said, how many people do you think will be sent here if I send you some people? 200 people, said Qingyi immediately. At least 200 people, only then can we solve the problem of the shortage of instructors here. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, it's impossible to send 200 people. Give me some time. I'll send 100 people in 2 months at most. However, I need you to send some people to train them for 3 months. Are they not from our everlasting feast hall? Asked Qingyi quickly. Not yet, but they will be soon, said Tan Xiu lightly. 62,200 former orphans would become Tan Xiu's most loyal men in the future, as well as the foundation for him to return to the immortal world. Therefore, the instructors who would train these children must be absolutely loyal and devoted. It seemed that the plan he had been thinking about recently was about to start. Chapter 802. Tan Xiu originally had 2 plans in the near future. The first was to go to Longquan Bay in Kanas to try to open the mysterious immortal trove, and the second was to go to Israel with a large sum of money to buy people. But now it seemed that going to Israel was more urgent than going to Kanas. 2 days later, Tan Xiu appeared alone in Hong Kong. After getting off the passenger ship, he got into a taxi empty-handed. He originally planned to go directly to his residence in Hong Kong, but on the way, he changed his mind and went to the Grand Fortune Jewelry Group. Although he was the big boss of Grand Fortune Jewelry, he had never been there before. Jade. He had a lot of jade in his interspatial ring, most of which were of very high quality. Once these jade were processed and carved, he would have a large number of finished jade carvings. He could make a lot of money if he sold them. He wasn't short of money at the moment, but if he could make more money through the Grand Fortune Jewelry's sales channel, he could buy more jade raw materials. Central, located on the north coast of Hong Kong, was the commercial, financial, and banking center of Hong Kong. It was also the decision-making and power center of the SAR government. It could be said that this place was the most prosperous place in the whole of Hong Kong. The Grand Fortune Jewelry Group was a 33-story building covering a large area. The first to the 13th floor was the commercial area with various luxury brand shops, restaurants, entertainment, supermarkets, and other high-end consumer areas. The 14th to 18th floors were the boutique stores of the Grand Fortune Jewelry Group. The 19th to 33rd floors were the core areas of the Grand Fortune Jewelry Group. Tan Xiu took a taxi to the south gate of the building. After paying the fare, he strolled inside. After checking the signs inside, he took the elevator straight to the 14th floor. Welcome. For hostesses in cheongsams with curvaceous figures bowed one after another. The smiles on their beautiful faces were very sweet. Tan Xiu nodded slightly. After entering the door, he found that the store was decorated with high-end decorations. The staff was not bad, but the number of customers was also quite high. He even saw a member of a tour group looking at the gold, silver, jewelry, jade, and jadeite inside under the guidance of a tour guide. Hello, sir. How may I be of service to you? A smiling female shop assistant in a black suit came up and asked. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, I'm just strolling around. You continue with your work. Don't worry about me. A look of disappointment flashed in the shop assistant's eyes. Tan Xiu's appearance was extremely handsome. Even at first glance, it made her heart beat faster by half a beat. In addition, Tan Xiu was wearing famous brands. She felt that he should be the second generation of a rich family, or even the third generation of a rich family. I don't have a boyfriend. The shop assistant muttered in her heart and left reluctantly. Tan Xiu didn't know what the shop assistant was thinking. With a leisurely mood, he strolled around the store on this floor. He found that the items sold were very ordinary. The most expensive piece of jewelry was only a few 100,000. 15th floor. When Tan Xiu arrived, he found that the prices of the items here were higher. There were even a few platinum diamond rings that were worth more than 1 million. Afterward, he looked at the items on the 16th and 17th floors. He found that the higher he went, the more expensive the items were. Especially on the 17th floor. Although there weren't many items, there were more than a dozen of them that were worth more than 10 million. Hello, sir. The 18th floor is the VIP area of our Grand Fortune Jewelry. May I ask if you're a VIP of our Grand Fortune Jewelry? Two big men in black suits stopped Tan Xiu at the elevator door, while a beautiful woman at the counter next to them asked politely. No. Tan Xiu shook his head. Then, are you a staff member of our Grand Fortune Jewelry? Asked the woman again. You can say so. Tan Xiu thought for a while and said. If you're a staff member of our Grand Fortune Jewelry, you'll need to swipe your work card to go upstairs, said the beautiful woman with a smile. I don't have a work card. Tan Xiu shook his head and forced a smile. The woman looked blank for a moment before she immediately said with a smile, You must be joking, sir. Every staff member of our Grand Fortune Jewelry has a work card. You won't be able to go to the upper floors without a work card. Tan Xiu fell into silence for a moment and curiously asked, Are the gold, silver, and jewelry on the 18th floor more expensive? The price is indeed higher, said the beautiful woman. A disdainful look flashed in her eyes as she spoke. Although she concealed it well, Tan Xiu's sharp eyes still caught it quickly. However, he didn't bother to pay attention to this beautiful woman's thoughts. He took out his mobile and dialed Hao Lei's number. Can't get through for the time being. Tan Xiu stared blankly and immediately released his spiritual sense. Half a second later, he found Hao Lei's figure in the jade processing room on the 26th floor. At the moment, she was concentrating on carving a fist-sized jade stone, while her mobile phone and 2 palm-sized notebooks were placed on the table nearby. Tan Xiu looked at the beautiful woman and said, I'll have to trouble you to inform the person in charge here, Hao Lei. Tell her to come down. By the way, she should be on the 26th floor. The beautiful woman looked at Tan Xiu with a strange expression. The smile on her face faded a lot and said, Have you made an appointment with our general manager in advance, sir? No. I just came to Hong Kong, so she doesn't know. Tan Xiu shook his head. The beautiful woman was silent for a moment and then said with an apologetic look, I'm sorry. I don't have the right to contact her since you haven't made an appointment with our general manager in advance. Sir, if you want to buy gold, silver, and jewelry from our store, there are many good things on the 17th floor, many of which are very expensive. Tan Xiu let out a wry smile. He turned around and walked to the chair on the side and sat down, saying, Forget it. I'll inform her myself. Just do your thing and don't mind me. The beautiful woman frowned and looked at Tan Xiu for a long time. Finally, she secretly shook her head. She could recognize most of the young masters from the aristocratic families in Hong Kong, but she was sure that she had never seen Tan Xiu before. Furthermore, he seemed to have just arrived in Hong Kong, so he shouldn't be a Hong Kong native. There must be something fishy going on. The beautiful woman turned her head and looked at the 2 big men in black suits. While Tan Xiu wasn't paying attention, she quickly made a gesture. Immediately, one of the big men strode to Tan Xiu and said in an unfriendly tone, Sir, since you said that you have a way to contact our general manager, then we'll give you 10 minutes. Please leave this place if you don't get any results in 10 minutes. Tan Xiu lightly glanced at the big man in front of him and then cast an art. His voice condensed into a line and quickly transmitted to Hao Lei's ears on the 26th floor. It's me. Come to the elevator on the 17th floor. On the 26th floor. Hao Lei was sitting in front of the workbench, concentrating on carving the jade in her hand. She was the general manager of the Grand Fortune Jewelry, but she had a very high interest in carving jade. She usually came here to carve for a while when she had nothing to do. "Who's there?" Hao Lei abruptly raised her head and looked around. She found that other than some busy staff, no one was looking at her, and no one was talking to her. That voice, it's a bit familiar. Hao Lei was sure that she wasn't hallucinating, but she couldn't remember whose voice it was no matter how hard she racked her brain. "I'm Tan Xiu." Just as her head was filled with confusion, the voice once again rang in her ears. In an instant, Hao Lei abruptly jumped up from her chair, her eyes bursting with light. Almost without hesitation, she put down the jade and carving knife in her hands, and took off her work clothes as fast as she could. Then, she rushed toward the elevator with big strides. She finally understood why she felt that the voice was a bit familiar. It was the voice of the big boss. She was even more clear that the big boss could transmit sound over a long distance. At the elevator on the 17th floor, a young man with an obsequious smile followed a hot and beautiful girl. When they arrived, the young man directly handed out the VIP card and said, "We want to go shopping on the 18th floor." An envious look flashed in the eyes of the beautiful woman behind the counter. She respectfully took the VIP card and came out, saying, "Please wait for a while. The elevator will be here soon." The young man ignored the beautiful woman and looked at the girl next to him with a flattering expression, saying, "Little Hui, I've been pestering my mother for 2 days just to get this VIP card. You can choose any of the treasures on the 18th floor of the Grand Fortune Jewelry if you see one you like." Yang Hui, the only daughter of a rich man in Hong Kong, was also the goddess in the eyes of the young man. She had been spoiled since childhood and had always been proud and arrogant. Although the background of the young man around her was not inferior to hers, she didn't have much interest. "You said it yourself, Qi Changxing. I've been wanting to buy that crystal love for a long time, but the price is too high, so I've been hesitating. Since you said you'll give it to me, then don't go back on your words." Qi Changxing nodded without hesitation and said, "Don't worry. As long as you like it, I don't mind taking out all my savings to buy it for you." Yang Hui pursed her lips and was a bit disappointed inwardly. She didn't know how much savings Qi Changxing had, but she knew the price of the crystal love very well. While waiting for the elevator, Yang Hui turned her head and glanced at Tan Xiu, who was sitting on the chair. After thinking for a while, she called out to Tan Xiu, "Hey, can you give me the chair?" Tan Xiu raised his head and glanced at Yang Hui before lowering his head again. Qi Changxing looked at Tan Xiu. He didn't see Tan Xiu's face clearly, so he didn't recognize that this man in front of him was the malefic star who once caused the Qi family to lose 2 billion yuan. In order to show off in front of his goddess, he immediately walked over and kicked Tan Xiu's calf, saying, "Hey, buddy. Don't you need to be a gentleman in front of a lady? Please let me have a seat." Tan Xiu raised his head again and indifferently said, "What if I don't want to be a gentleman?" Chapter 803. Tan Xiu was disgusted by Yang Hui's attitude and disliked Qi Changxing's means of pursuing a girl, especially a girl who didn't know how to be polite. However, he couldn't help but sigh at how small the world was. He never expected to bump into an old acquaintance like Qi Changxing as soon as he arrived in Hong Kong. Qi Changxing's words had just come out when he saw Tan Xiu's face. The words that were about to come out of his mouth were swallowed back into his stomach in a flash, and even his calves couldn't help but shiver. Fiend, fiend. At this moment, Qi Changxing regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that he would run into a living evil star like Tan Xiu here. What scared him the most was that he had kicked him lightly just now. "What about me?" asked Tan Xiu indifferently. "Are you not satisfied with my answer? Or do you think you kicked me too lightly just now?" Qi Changxing's heart turned cold in an instant. He would have knelt down before Tan Xiu if it weren't for his goddess. Squeezing out a smile, Qi Changxing respectfully bowed and said, Mr. Tang, Changxing absolutely doesn't dare to have any dissatisfied thoughts. Had I known it was you, I wouldn't have dared to kick you even if I had the courage to do so. Please be magnanimous and don't stoop to my level. Tan Xiu shook his head and sighed, why do you never learn from your mistakes? Was the previous lesson too light? I've never done anything out of line since we parted ways in Hong Kong, Mr. Tang, said Qi Changxing bitterly. It's just that I like shall we, so I just wanted to perform better. Tan Xiu could understand Qi Changxing's thoughts, but he didn't approve of his means of pursuing a girl. He lightly said, pursuing a girl doesn't depend on material or money. It's the mutual affection between a man and a woman that can last a long time and spend a lifetime together. You're on your own now. Having said that, Tan Xiu didn't want to talk to Qi Changxing anymore. He closed his eyes again and waited for Hao Lei's arrival. Yang Hui looked at Tan Xiu with a strange expression, and her eyes darted to Qi Changxing from time to time. Suddenly, she became curious about this handsome young man in front of her. His words and actions were filled with a mature charm. She knew Qi Changxing's identity and knew that he must have a powerful background if he could make him act so respectfully in Hong Kong. Who are you? Yang Hui could not help but ask. Tan Xiu didn't answer her. He didn't even bother to answer her. His actions caused the beautiful woman to reveal a surprised expression. The way she looked at Tan Xiu was completely different from before. Even the two burly men guarding the elevator door looked at each other with a confused look on their faces. Buzz, the elevator door slowly opened and Hao Lei strode out. Her eyes swept over Qi Changxing and Yang Hui before finally landing on Tan Xiu. She paced a few steps forward and respectfully called out, "What brings you here, boss?" Tan Xiu opened his eyes, stood up and said, "I need to talk to you about something. I happened to pass by Hong Kong, so I dropped by. Get me a work permit later, lest I get turned away again." Hao Lei abruptly turned around and glared at the beautiful woman next to the bar counter, shouting, "He's the big boss of our Grand Fortune Jewelry. How dare you stop him before?" The beautiful woman's pupils shrunk and the hairs all over her body stood on end. She hurriedly said with a frightened expression, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were the big boss." "It's all right. You can't be blamed for not knowing." Tan Xiu waved his hand and said, "It's your duty to stop people who don't meet the standards. Hao Lei, please don't blame her. All right, let's find a quiet place and talk about something." Hao Lei quickly nodded and ignored the beautiful woman. She led Tan Xiu into the elevator and then pressed the button for the 33rd floor. As the elevator went up, Tan Xiu asked, "How's the business of the Grand Fortune Jewelry recently? Did you encounter any difficulties?" "Our business has been good recently, but the sales have decreased by 20% compared to the first half of last year," said Hao Lei. "It has nothing to do with the money. The main thing is..." "What's the main thing?" asked Tan Xiu. "I don't know the reason, but there's a force in the country that suddenly purchased jade raw materials on a large scale, leading to an extreme shortage of jade raw materials in the market. We originally had a supply channel, but the price has skyrocketed recently and the quantity has obviously decreased, leading to a shortage of our stock. The increase in price has also greatly affected our sales." A smile appeared on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth. He naturally knew which force in the country was secretly purchasing jade raw materials on a large scale. But he didn't expect that the price of jade raw materials would skyrocket due to this reason and even affect his business. "Is our Grand Fortune Jewelry the only one affected? Or..." "It's not just us," said Hao Lei quickly. "All the major jewelry merchants in the country have been affected. Many of them are secretly regretting that they didn't stock more jade raw materials. Since everyone is affected, then it's not an internal matter of Grand Fortune Jewelry." Tan Xiu nodded with satisfaction. "You have a need in this regard, so I'll solve it." "That's right. How many jade raw materials do you need to solve the shortage of stock?" Hao Lei was stunned. She didn't expect that her big boss could help solve the jade reserve problem. She thought for a while and said, a ton of jade raw materials can solve the urgent problem. If the quantity is too much, half a ton is barely enough. If I give you 5 tons, can you use it to make more profits? Tan Xiu smiled. When the jade raw materials are sufficient in the future, can you use the profits to buy more jade raw materials? Hao Lei was at a loss whether to cry or laugh. You don't know the scarcity of jade raw materials, do you, boss? Although the major jade mines all over the world produce a lot of jade raw materials every year, the total output is less than 5 tons. You actually. Alright, don't stare at me. If you can really get 5 tons of good quality jade raw materials, I guarantee that you can buy at least 2 tons more in the future. Of course, you can buy at least 5 tons more if you sell the engraved products after processing. Doubled? Tang Xiu's expression moved and asked with a slightly surprised expression. That's right. I can definitely double it. Hao Lei firmly nodded. Tan Xiu nodded and followed Hao Lei out of the elevator. After coming to her office, he directly took out an interspatial ring and handed it to her, saying, "This interspatial ring is for you. It's a reward for the benefits you're about to earn for the company. There are 5 tons of jade inside. You can take out the jade raw materials and see their quality after you've bound it with your blood." An interspatial ring? Hao Lei's whole body seemed to be struck by lightning and she directly froze on the spot. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. After a while, she carefully took the interspatial ring with trembling hands. Then, she bit her finger and dripped her blood on it. Whoosh! A fist-sized jade raw material appeared in her hand out of thin air and was then put into the interspatial ring under her control. After repeatedly testing it more than a dozen times, she excitedly said, "I just observed it with my spiritual sense and found that there are indeed a lot of jade raw materials inside, boss. That's great. The reputation of our Grand Fortune jewelry will definitely be greatly improved with these jade raw materials, and we'll be able to obtain more benefits in a short time. The quality is really good, isn't it?" asked Tan Xiu with a smile. "Very good." Hao Lei firmly nodded and said, "Though it can't be compared with those top-grade jade raw materials, it's still considered as top-grade jade raw materials. I'll immediately contact all the carving masters and have them carve the finished products day and night." "You'll see what happens next," said Tan Xiu. "I'll give you 3 months to buy a batch of jade raw materials with the money you get from selling the jade wares. Do keep in mind that the market price is very high, so try to suppress the price and maximize the profits." "No problem," Hao Lei solemnly replied. Tan Xiu suddenly recalled something and asked, "What's the most valuable item in the VIP area on the 18th floor of our Grand Fortune jewelry? How valuable is it?" "It's a blue crystal named the Heart of the Ocean," said Hao Lei with a smile. "This blue crystal is the size of a baby's fist and has a blue color all over. It was carved by the most outstanding carving master in Hong Kong in 6 to 10 years, and it's also the signature treasure of our Grand Fortune jewelry. As for the price, it's priced at 1,888,888,888 million. Some super-rich people in Hong Kong want to buy it, but they eventually flinched after seeing such a high price." Tan Xiu was secretly surprised. He didn't expect that a blue crystal could be priced at such a high price. After thinking for a while, he slowly said, "Take me to have a look." "All right." Hao Lei replied and led Tan Xiu to the VIP area on the 18th floor. Several security doors were opened and the two of them appeared in a transparent glass room. "Is this the blue crystal?" Tang Xiu had a look of disbelief when he saw the flawless, sparkling and translucent Heart of the Ocean inside the tempered glass cabinet on the booth. Hao Lei didn't notice the strange expression on Tan Xiu's face. She looked at the Heart of the Ocean and couldn't move her eyes away. She gently nodded and said, "That's right. This is the Heart of the Ocean. Rumor has it that it was fished out from the sea by a country Y, but I don't know how exactly it was fished out. You can give it to your beloved girl if you like it, boss. I'm sure every girl will love it. Give it to a girl I like." Tan Xiu nearly coughed up a mouthful of blood. He glared at Hao Lei and nearly cursed her for having eyes but failing to recognize Mount Tai and recklessly wasting God's gift. What is this? This is a treasure that immortals yearn for, and it's something that countless top immortals are looking forward to getting. Once this thing appears in the immortal world, it will definitely set off a bloody battle for it. But this treasure is actually regarded as jewelry. Chapter 804. Had it been in the immortal world, Tan Xiu would have found it hard to believe that a peerless treasure like the source water stone was being sold as jewelry. But this was Earth, and Tan Xiu had seen too many peerless treasures being sold as ordinary items by the secular world. Where can I buy this thing? Tan Xiu took a deep breath and turned to look at Hao Lei. Hao Lei finally noticed that Tan Xiu's mood was not right. She glanced at the heart of the ocean in astonishment and slowly said, "As far as I know, there's only one blue crystal of this quality. There are a few amethysts, and the most famous one is the gem of rose inlaid on the crown of the Empress of Country-wise imperial family. Unfortunately, that gem of rose is not for sale. You can't buy it no matter how much money you have." A glint flashed in Tan Xiu's eyes as he nodded and said, "Help me pay attention to the best crystals in the world. If you find one with similar or better quality, immediately tell me. I'll take this heart of the ocean since it's very important to me." "It's a blessing for this heart of the ocean to be fancied by you, boss," said Hao Lei with a smile. In a high-end cafe near the Grand Fortune Jewelry Building, Qi Chengxing was absent-mindedly drinking his coffee. Even though the goddess he had admired for a long time was sitting opposite him, he couldn't be bothered to be attentive at the moment. Fortunately, Tan Xiu didn't make things difficult for him, else he knew that even if he didn't die, a layer of his skin would have been peeled off. Of course. He didn't remember that the Grand Fortune Jewelry was Tan Xiu's business before, but he suddenly recalled it after seeing Hao Lei. The emergence of this memory made him secretly make up his mind that he would never go to the Grand Fortune Jewelry to buy things again. He would try not to set foot within 2 kilometers of the Grand Fortune Jewelry and the Everlasting Feast Hall to avoid encountering that fiend again. "Qi Chengxing, there's something wrong with you." Yang Hui stirred the sweetened coffee with a spoon. A strange expression hung on her beautiful face, but her tone was deliberately indifferent. Qi Chengxing raised his head and bitterly said, "I won't be scared even if I meet the richest man in Hong Kong, Li Juren. It can be said that the only person in this world who can make me afraid is that." Yang Hui narrowed her eyes and quickly asked, "Who's that?" Qi Chengxing was silent for a few seconds and then quietly looked around. After finding that no one was paying attention to them, he lowered his voice and said, "Shall we, if I tell you, you must promise not to spread it out. Otherwise, I'll be in big trouble." Yang Hui immediately said seriously, "I guarantee that this matter will only be known by the heavens, the earth, you, and me. No one else will know about it. His name is Tan Xiu, the big boss of Grand Fortune Jewelry and the Everlasting Feast Hall," said Qi Chengxing in a low voice. "You should know about Jiang Yu, Chen Fei, and Du Yang, right?" Yang Hui's eyes instantly turned round and she exclaimed, "Something happened to some of their businesses last year. I heard that they offended some very powerful people and got into big trouble in the end. Oh right, there's also your Qi family. Don't tell me he did it." "Of course it was him," said Qi Chengxing with a forced smile. "I'm afraid he's the only one in China who can do it. My Qi family only lost 2 billion yuan, but the other 3. Alas, let me tell you something. The 4 of us offended Tan Xiu and lost at least 20 billion yuan. Gasp, Yang Hui knew what 20 billion yuan meant. Even if her Yang family was a big family in Hong Kong and had many businesses in other places, their total assets were less than half of 20 billion yuan. At dusk. After Tan Xiu and Hao Lei had dinner together, Mo Ao rushed to Hong Kong with 10 guards. After calling Tan Xiu, Hao Lei drove him to Hong Kong's airport. "Do you want me to go with you, boss?" asked Hao Lei with an expectant look in her eyes. "Forget it." Tan Xiu shook his head and smilingly said. Just stay in Hong Kong and try to process those 5 tons of raw jade as soon as possible and then sell them. I'm afraid I'll need a lot of raw jade in September, so I hope it won't delay my business. No problem. Hao Lei nodded. It took 6.5 hours to fly from Hong Kong to Tel Aviv. They took off at 8 a.m. and arrived in Tel Aviv at about 3:30 a.m. Since Tan Xiu used the small notebook, none of the passengers who took the flight that night were able to board the plane. There were only 12 people on the plane, including Tan Xiu. Tel Aviv was the second largest city in Israel and a modern international metropolis with a population of about 400,000. It was bordered by the eastern Mediterranean Sea and had an urban area of 51.76 square kilometers. The labor camp 1319 was not located in downtown Tel Aviv. It was located in Bat Yam, one of the surrounding urban agglomerations. Bat Yam only had a population of a few 100,000 people, but its economic level was quite good. Although it was slightly worse than the third-tier cities in China, it was still comparable to some of the counties under the municipalities. Labor Camp 1319 was located more than 10 kilometers southeast of Bat Yam. It covered a large area and looked like a sturdy castle from the outside. Early morning. Tan Xiu and the others smoothly checked into the best hotel in Bat Yam. Mo, who had been here before, was particularly familiar with this small town. On the 5th floor of the hotel. Standing by the window, Tan Xiu looked to the southeast and asked, "Oh, tell me what you think." "The current top commander of Labor Camp 1319 is no longer the one we met before," said Mo. "I contacted my former collaborator on the way here, Gus Gillis, a powerful gang leader in Tel Aviv. I learned from him that the new top commander of the labor camp is called Augustino, a particularly greedy person. But that guy has been using a particularly insidious trick to amass wealth recently, so it's going to be more difficult to buy a large number of prisoners from Labor Camp 1319 than before." Using the prisoners to amass wealth? Tan Xiu was surprised. "How did he do it?" "Dark life and death boxing match," said Mo. Tan Xiu furrowed his brows. He suddenly recalled the scene he once saw in a movie where the prisoners of several prisons were gathered together for an underground boxing match, while a large number of rich people secretly came to the boxing venue through shady channels to gamble. If it was really like the movie, Tan Xiu realized that it would be very difficult to buy the world's top assassin, Spectre, with $100 million. "Tell me what you think." Tan Xiu lit a cigarette and calmly asked. "I think you should meet our former collaborator, Gus Gillis, first," said Mo. "He's the most suitable person to buy prisoners. However, Gus Gillis is also a greedy person. We'll need to spend more money if we don't want to expose our identities." Tan Xiu pondered for a moment and nodded. "It's indeed not suitable for us to show up directly." "You're right. We'll only need to spend some money at most if we use the local tyrant to do things for us. It'll save us from being exposed later and implicating us." "Where's this Gus Gillis you mentioned?" "He's in Tel Aviv. Can you ask him to come here?" asked Tan Xiu. "Arrange for us to meet." "No problem," said Mo with a smile. "Gus Gillis may not know our specific identities, but he's well aware of our strength. He won't dare to easily offend us." Tan Xiu nodded and motioned for him to contact Gus Gillis. He then silently pondered about the matter. He brought a total of $1 billion this time, but he had no idea how many prisoners he could buy. However, he needed to consider another matter. If $1 billion couldn't buy 100 powerful prisoners, then he would have to implement another plan. However, this plan was somewhat dangerous, and the slightest carelessness would lead to the Tel Aviv government's armed suppression. Furthermore, he had to meet the prisoners before he bought them. If possible, he decided to enter the prison as a prisoner first. After he selected the prisoners he wanted to buy, he would discuss the deal with the prison's top officer, Augustino. In the afternoon, 4 black SUVs roared and arrived at the hotel where Tan Xiu was staying. Protected by more than a dozen stalwart men, a middle-aged man in a white suit and sunglasses stepped out of the 3rd black SUV. The middle-aged Caucasian man had a shaved head and tattoos on his left cheek and neck. After Mo appeared at the entrance of the hotel with 2 guards, Gus Gillis put on a bright smile and strode towards Mo. "Nice to see you in Bat Yam, old friend. You still have such an extraordinary aura even after so many years." Mo smiled and hugged him. "You look a lot younger, Gus Gillis. Could it be that you're living a better and better life after ruling Tel Aviv's underworld? Don't listen to other people's nonsense, oh." Gus Gillis shook his head and smilingly said, "If I could rule the entire Tel Aviv underworld, I'd wake up laughing even in my dreams. What a pity. Youngsters nowadays are getting more and more powerful. I've been forced by a bunch of little bastards recently. Tell me, is there anything I can help you with?" asked Mo with a strange smile. Gus Gillis narrowed his eyes and looked at the 2 men behind Mo. Then, he immediately said with a smile, "Don't worry about it. I'm very curious, though. What kind of big shot can make you become his subordinate?" "That's right, there's another question. Where's your dear brother, One? How come I don't see him?" "My brother is on another mission, so he didn't come with me," said Mo with a smile. "As for our boss, don't blame me for not reminding you in advance that you'd better be respectful when you see him. Not only does he have a lot of powerful men than me, but he also has a terrifying strength himself." "Can you tell me where you come from, oh?" asked Gus Gillis in surprise. The smile on Mo's face faded a lot. He moved closer to Gus Gillis and whispered in his ear, "I don't mind telling you if your power is comparable to the Stygian Club. Else, telling you will only harm you." Chapter 805. Gus Gillis had seen a lot of powerful people and also met many people he couldn't afford to provoke. Yet, he didn't have much fear toward those people. However, at this moment, a chill suddenly rose in his heart and even froze the curiosity at the bottom of his heart. The Stygian Club. Gus Gillis had heard of this legendary organization and knew how terrifying its strength was. But from Mo's words, it was clear that his boss had the power to wrestle with the Stygian Club. After taking a deep breath, Gus Gillis concealed a smile. Although his smile was a bit stiff, his words were very clear, "Since it's inconvenient to say, then forget it. But I still don't understand why your boss is looking for me. Is it the same as last time? Are you targeting some prisoners in labor camp 1319? Don't worry, Gus Gillis. You'll naturally know my boss's intentions when you see him," said Mo. A few minutes later, Mo brought Gus Gillis to the guest room where Tan Shio was staying. Although Gus Gillis was surprised by Tan Shio's young age, he was still quite respectful. After exchanging some pleasantries with Tan Shio, he then asked about the doubt in his heart, "Boss Tang, I don't think you just want to chat with me since you called me here, right? If there's anything you need my help with, I'll never refuse as long as it's within my ability. May I know how much you know about Labor Camp 1319? Asked Tan Shio. Are you familiar with the highest official of this prison? Gus Gillis nodded and said, Boss Tang, you should have heard from Wu that I was once imprisoned in Labor Camp 1319. Fortunately, I had a lot of wealth before I was imprisoned there, so I used most of my money to buy my freedom. Hence, I know a lot about the situation inside this prison. As for Augustino, I've only dealt with him a few times, and he secretly arranged the Dark Life and Death boxing tournament. If that's the case, why don't we make a deal? Tan Shio said with satisfaction. What deal? Asked Gus Gillis. I'll pay you $20 million for your hard work, said Tan Shio. Help me buy a batch of prisoners from Labor Camp 1319. Also, you need to find a way to get me inside. Give me a week. I'll give you the names of the prisoners in a week. Gus Gillis was surprised. You want to buy a batch of prisoners from there? And not just one. Tan Shio lightly said, I don't need to travel thousands of miles to come here personally just to buy a prisoner. I want to buy a batch, and the number must not be less than 100. Impossible. Gus Gillis bluntly shouted, Even if Augustino is the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319, he wouldn't dare to sell so many felons to you. Not to mention 100 people, even if there were a dozen of them, I'm afraid he wouldn't have the guts. Tan Xiu frowned and said, he doesn't have enough power. Or does someone above him control him? Given Augustino's authority, it's not a problem to sell dozens of felons, said Gus Gillis. But the crux of the problem is, the prisoners in Labor Camp 1319 are all extremely terrifying felons. Just a few of them can cause great harm to the society if they are casually released. Augustino does regard money as his life, but he's not someone who will easily court death. You mean? Augustino is afraid that if he sells too many prisoners, they will eventually cause trouble for him once they do something big outside? Asked Tang Xiu. Is that right? That's right, said Gus Gillis. Tan Xiu squinted his eyes and pondered silently. He felt that Gus Gillis's words were very reasonable. If he were the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319, he wouldn't take such a big risk for money. But if he didn't cooperate, wouldn't it be a waste of his trip? Or should he really resort to that very dangerous method, to create a riot? Secretly helping those prisoners escape? I have an idea, boss. Inside the room, Jean Sher suddenly spoke. You have an idea? Asked Tan Xiu in surprise. Tell me about it. A cold look flashed in Jean Sher's eyes as he seriously said, Augustino is doomed to not dare to sell so many prisoners to us, so it's better to secretly contact the number 2 figure of Labor Camp 1319. As long as he's willing to cooperate with us and sell a large number of prisoners to us, we'll help him get rid of Augustino. As for whether he can sit on the top seat in the prison, it's all up to his own efforts. That's right. Tan Xiu clapped and nodded with satisfaction. Your idea is really good. If the number 2 figure of Labor Camp 1319 isn't an idiot, he'll cooperate with us. Gus Gillis, who's the number 2 figure of Labor Camp 1319? Sander, answered Gus Gillis after thinking for a while. Is there a way to contact him? Asked Tan Xiu. Can we contact him and arrange a secret meeting? Asked Tang Xiu. I'm Augustino's honored guest, so Sander will give me some face. Gus Gillis nodded. Mr. Tang, if you really have the ability to satisfy Sander in terms of money and also get rid of Augustino, I'm sure Sander will agree to the deal with you. But what? Asked Tan Xiu with raised eyebrows. But can we change the deal between us? Asked Gus Gillis with all seriousness. I don't want money. I just need you to help me with something. Tell me, what kind of help? Asked Tan Xiu. After your plan succeeds, I want you to help me kill 4 people, said Gus Gillis. They're powerful gang leaders in Tel Aviv. Tan Xiu didn't rush to answer Gus Gillis, but asked with a faint smile instead, if we help you kill those 4 leaders, will you have a way to become the big boss of Tel Aviv's underground forces? That's right. Gus Gillis didn't conceal it and replied with all seriousness, as long as those 4 are dead, their underlings will stir up trouble and even fight among themselves for the position of the big boss. When they fight to the death, that's the time for me to act. I'm 70 to 80% confident that I can become the big boss of the entire Tel Aviv underworld once those 4 are dead. It's a pleasure to cooperate with you. Tan Xiu nodded. Gus Gillis didn't expect that Tan Xiu would agree so readily. He immediately said with excitement, I'll have to trouble you to find a way to contact Sander. I'll inform you personally after I've determined the time and place. All right. Watching Gus Gillis leave, Tan Xiu then waved to Jean Sher and said, follow him secretly and monitor his movements. If you find him doing one thing in front of us and another behind our backs, kill him directly. Understood. Jean Sher nodded cautiously and quietly followed him. Labor Camp 1319. At the northernmost end of the prison was a 6-story building. Inside the bottommost floor was an extremely spacious hall. At this moment, there was a ring in the hall. Aside from 2 boxers in big pants fighting desperately on the ring, there were also hundreds of people sitting in the surrounding audience seats. Who do you think will win the final match, Sir Augustino? A foreign man in a suit and shiny leather shoes comfortably smoked a cigar and casually asked while puffing out a cloud of smoke. As the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319, Augustino still replied with an obsequious smile, Mr. New Vale, Meat Grinder No. 3 and Grim Reaper Sickle No. 6 are very powerful experts in our prison. Meat Grinder No. 3 has a record of 4 wins, while Grim Reaper Sickle No. 6 also has a record of 4 wins and 1 draw. That's why I can't guess who the final winner will be when they fight. Pointing to Death's Scythe, Zinvari slowly said, I think the final winner will be that Death's Scythe. He hasn't taken out the weapon he's good at up until now, and his opponent hasn't pressured him too much. As for Meat Grinder, haven't you noticed that he's very strong, but his speed is too slow? Augustino nodded thoughtfully and said, I think Mr. Zinvari is right. I hope he can win the best match. Otherwise, I'll lose all the money I've invested. Zinvari was an arms dealer who controlled various channels of arms trafficking in Israel and even had a very close relationship with the state. Augustino could become the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319 because Zinvari had secretly spent a lot of money to help him. Any carelessness in a fight between experts will cost you your life. Besides, the situation in a fight is ever-changing, and no one can say who will be the final winner. Zinvari nodded. Suddenly, Sander, who was sitting in the chair next to Augustino, suddenly took out his mobile phone and was a bit surprised when he saw the caller ID. It was because he found that the person who called him turned out to be Gus Gillis, the most powerful gang leader in Tel Aviv. What does he want from me? Although Sander didn't want to pay attention to Gus Gillis, he couldn't pretend not to see him at this time. He quickly glanced at Augustino, bent his waist and left the auditorium. He ran to a remote place outside, picked up the phone and said, Gus Gillis, shouldn't you take the initiative to look for Augustino? Why did you call me? Promotion and getting rich is a good thing. I wonder if you're interested in it. Gus Gillis's voice came out of the phone. Sorry, I don't understand what you mean, said Sander with a frown. You don't need to understand anything else for the time being. Just remember to cooperate with me. Not only will you be promoted to become the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319, but you'll also earn a huge amount of money. I'll arrange the meeting place and time tomorrow at noon. Chapter 806. Sander held the phone in his hand, his eyes shining. He knew Gus Gillis's identity, and he didn't trust this ruthless gang leader very much. However, Gus Gillis's words still piqued his interest. Sander was indeed fond of money, but what he liked the most was the position of the highest officer of Labor Camp 1319. It was because he was well aware that as long as he could sit in the top position of the prison, it would be tantamount to a lot of money flowing into his pocket. Go. After careful consideration, Sander gave Gus Gillis an answer. At noon the next day. In an inconspicuous cafe in a remote neighborhood of Bat Yam, Sander met Gus Gillis, who had arrived ahead of him. After sending away the 2 trusted subordinates who had followed him for many years, Sander sat in front of Gus Gillis alone. He lit up a cigarette and asked while smoking, Mr. Gus Gillis, I like straightforward people, and I like dealing with honest people even more. What exactly do you want from me? Don't worry, Warden Sander. Gus Gillis lightly smiled and said, It's naturally a good thing that I'm looking for you. It's just that I'm not the protagonist who needs to meet you today. I'm just looking for you to act as a middleman for him. Sander slightly furrowed his brows and asked in a deep voice, Who is he? It doesn't matter who he is. Gus Gillis shook his head and said, What's important is that he can give you what you want. For example, power and money. Sander fell into silence. He was getting more and more curious. Who exactly was this person? What was his purpose in coming here? He had been prepared to encounter danger this time. Even if the other party's request was too excessive, he must agree to it for the time being. At worst, he would just leave this coffee shop and refuse to acknowledge his debt. I'm not late, am I? Tan Xiu quickly arrived and spoke in fluent English. Gus Gillis immediately got up and introduced, "You're not late, Mr. Tang. Let me introduce you. This is Mr. Sander, the Deputy Warden of Labor Camp 1319. This is Mr. Tang, the protagonist who plans to cooperate with you this time." Tan Shio shook hands with Sander and then motioned him to sit. He then sat next to Gus Gillis and smilingly said, "I'm sure Warden Sander must be very curious about why I called you here. It's actually very simple. I want to make a deal with you." Sander sized up the young man in front of him. His eyes sparkled as he asked, "What deal?" Tan Shio was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, he raised his arm and quickly made a gesture. Suddenly, Mo All walked over from afar with a suitcase in his hand. When he placed the suitcase on the table, he opened it and saw a suitcase full of US dollars. "Warden Sander, here's $1 million. Whether or not we can strike a deal today, this money is yours. Consider it a gift for our first meeting." Sander's expression changed. $1 million was not a lot of money to him. His net worth was more than $10 million. However, this action of Tang Shio's gave him a trace of favorable impression. Just as he was about to speak, his gaze inadvertently swept across Mo All's face. "Impossible." Sander abruptly stood up from the sofa and stared at Mo All with shock in his eyes. "I haven't seen you for many years, Warden Sander," said Mo All with a faint smile. "You've recovered from your injuries? I thought the Grim Reaper liked you and would take you away." Sander glared at Mo All with cold killing intent oozing from his teeth. "You're wrong. The Grim Reaper doesn't like me, so I'm very lucky to live until now. I still remember that you stabbed my left chest with a dagger back then. If it wasn't for the position of my heart being slightly different from an ordinary person's, I'm afraid I would have died in your hands. We were also trying to survive back then, and you were our enemy," said Mo All smilingly. "But now, my boss wants to make a deal with you, so we're no longer enemies. I like the saying that all the hustle and bustle in the world are for benefits, and all the hustle and bustle in the world are for benefits. There's no eternal enemy in this world, only eternal benefits. What do you think?" "What I want to know the most now is how big the benefits are," said Sander in a deep voice. Tan Shio waved to Mo All, motioning him to wait at the side. Then, he smilingly said, "I didn't expect All to have some relationship with Warden Sander. It should be said that no discord, no concord. As for how much you want to know, that will depend on your guts." Sander sat down again and asked, "Tell me more clearly." Tan Shio shook his head and said, "What I can tell you now is that as long as you're courageous enough, the currency of our deal should be in hundreds of millions, with the word US dollars added behind it." 100 million US dollars? Sander's heartbeat sped up and the anger on his face gradually dissipated. In just 5 or 6 seconds, a smile covered his face as he said, "You're Mr. Tang, right? Tell me about the details of the cooperation." "I want to buy prisoners from Labor Camp 1319, and a lot of them," said Tan Shio. "The number of prisoners will be at least 3 digits. 100? Sander's pupils shrunk and his body couldn't help but shiver. A storm was set off inside his heart, and his eyes were full of fear when he looked at Tan Shio. It must be noted that each and every one of the prisoners in Labor Camp 1319 was a vicious and wicked person who deserved to be shot countless times. Why did this young man in front of him want to buy so many prisoners? Did he want to form a terrorist organization? Sander didn't know how to answer because he didn't dare. Money was a good thing, and hundreds of millions of dollars was an astronomical figure for him. But no matter how much money he had, he still needed to be alive to spend it. By observing Sander's expression, Tang Shio could guess what he was thinking. A smile appeared on his handsome face as he said, "Warden Sander, I know you don't dare. But what if the crime of selling prisoners doesn't affect you and instead makes you the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319? What do you think of this outcome?" Sander's eyes lit up and he asked, "Do you have a way?" I'll send someone to kidnap Augustino before we make the deal, said Tan Shio with a smile. You'll use his name to make the deal with me. After the deal is done, you'll immediately report to the government, and I'll send someone to evacuate with Augustino, pretending to be fleeing. If Augustino is killed in the fierce battle, the dead will eventually be unable to testify, making Augustino the scapegoat. Countless thoughts churned in Sanders' mind, and the more he thought about it, the brighter his eyes became. After a long while, he asked his last worry, how can I believe you really have this ability? Augustino may regard money as his life, but he's also very concerned about his own safety. Every time he goes out, he'll bring at least several experts to protect his safety. Tan Shio pointed to Mo all not far away and said with a faint smile, what if I tell you that I brought a group of experts with strength similar to Ao to Bat Yam? Do you think you can do it? That bastard, Sander cursed inwardly before he finally nodded and said, that man of yours is very powerful. I've fought him before, so I know his strength. Then let's make a good implementation plan, said Tan Shio with a smile. Time fleeted by. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. In Labor Camp 1319, Augustino was comfortably nestled on a soft sofa, enjoying the service of a blonde beauty. In front of him, Sander was holding a file and putting it on the table. Augustino casually picked it up and glanced at it a few times. He then grabbed a pen and signed it, throwing it to Sander and said, a total of 13 people. You're in charge of arranging all of them. Remember, figure out their situation. If you find someone who's more powerful than you, remember to tell me. I'll get it done right away. Sander nodded. Augustino stopped Sander, who was about to make a move. He opened the drawer and took out 2 stacks of bills, throwing them to Sander and saying, take these $20,000 and distribute them to the brothers below. Tell them to work hard. As for your bonus, I've already transferred it to your account. Sander nodded with a smile. After he turned around and left the office, his expression immediately turned gloomy. His bonus each time was only $50,000 at most. Compared to Augustino, who could get at least hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, the difference was too big. That money, is he trying to get rid of a beggar? Sander cursed inwardly. Seeing that there was no one in the corridor, he took out a pen from his pocket and quickly added a name to the list of 13 prisoners, Richard. 10 minutes later, Sander appeared in the cell where the 14 prisoners had just been sent in. He watched as all of them were obediently handcuffed to the iron bars. His eyes finally fell on Tan Shio, and then he spoke to the prison guard next to him, take Richard out and put him in cell number 000018. Detain the rest in the cells in the back. Immediately. 2 prison guards unlocked Tan Shio's handcuffs and took him out of the room. One of the 13 prisoners, a young black man, shouted, hey, buddy, why did you specifically put him in cell number 000018? Could it be that you have received benefits from him? How much? $10,000? Or $100,000? I also have money. I also want to go to cell number 000018. Sander's complexion changed and he angrily shouted, shut the hell up, you damn black bastard. The prisoners in cell number 000018 have been sentenced for at least 200 years. If you want to die faster, I can promise you that. Hiss, the black youth sucked in a breath of cold air and instantly became listless. Tang Shio's pace came to a halt. He turned to look at the black youth and suddenly asked, what did you do, buddy? The young black man puffed out his chest and cursed, what's it got to do with you? Tan Shio looked at Sander and asked, tell me about his crimes. Sander lifted the file and read, Statanchu, Native American, burned down 16 shops and killed 9 people. Robbed a jewelry store, killed 3 people and seriously injured 4. Escaped from prison twice, respectively. Chapter 807. Listening to Subtanchu's criminal record, Tan Shio's interest was piqued. According to this guy's crimes, he would probably be sentenced to a few hundred years, right? How many years? Tan Xiu interrupted Sander and asked with a faint smile. Sander glanced at Subtanshu and lightly said, his crimes are very serious. 260 years. Tan Xiu smiled and said, I think he's very interesting and suitable to stay in cell 000018. Warden, how about you make an exception and lock him up with me? Sander nodded and said, take him to cell 000018 as well. If this brat doesn't behave himself, teach him a lesson first. In a flash. The 13 people, including Subtanshu, looked at Tan Xiu with a strange expression. They couldn't figure it out. Was this guy a prisoner? Or was he the boss of this prison? This guy in front of them, whom they called the warden, actually listened to a prisoner's words? The prison guards around Sander were his confidants. Although they didn't understand why their immediate superior would listen to a prisoner, they immediately unlocked Subtanshu's handcuffs and followed behind Sander. Corridors after corridors, gates after gates. The further they went inside, the more guards there were and the tighter the lockdown became. Midway, everyone took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked along the dark corridor to the end before arriving at cell 000018. As the steel cast door was opened, Tan Xiu and Subtanshu were pushed inside. You'll live here from now on. I'll come here every day to teach you a lesson. Sander's words carried a mysterious meaning. He looked deeply at Tan Xiu and immediately ordered the prison guards to close the door and lock it from the outside. Inside the cell, there were a total of 4 prisoners. What was most inconceivable to Tan Xiu was that one of them was actually a woman. The woman had bulging muscles all over her body and an exceptionally strong physique. Her rough face had a hideous scar on the left cheek that looked like a poisonous scorpion crawling on it. The other 3. A burly middle-aged man with a tiger's back and a bear's waist. He had many tattoos on his body, especially on his bare arms, where 2/3 of them were covered in tattoos. A skinny old man with a head full of white hair, who looked like he had 1 foot in the grave, held 2 dumbbells in his hands, which were at least dozens of kilograms in weight. They were lifted and put down by him as if they were as light as a feather. The last one was a gentle young man in his mid-20s. He was wearing gold-rimmed glasses and was reading a book in the innermost corner of the cell. Even when Tan Xiu and Subtanshu were sent in, he did not raise his head or blink his eyelids. Interesting. 2 prisoners were sent to our cell 000018 at the same time. This seems to be the first time something like this has happened. The burly man sat on the bed, stroking his chin as he chuckled. Tan Xiu sized up the 4 men and finally turned to look at Subtanshu. He smilingly said, I heard that the first thing you do after entering the prison is to be sent to the cell and then be beaten by the old men inside. Judging from the looks of these 4, I'm afraid you're going to suffer some physical pain. Subtanshu angrily glared at Tan Xiu. He clenched his fists, causing his bones to crackle as he coldly said, Brat, I think I need to teach you a lesson before I get beaten up. You bastard, you're the reason why the prison sent me here. Slap. Tan Xiu raised his hand and slapped Subtanshu's face. Before the man could react, the slap sent him flying and his body smashed on the single bed a few meters away. Then, Tan Xiu unhurriedly said, I brought you here to give you a great benefit. Don't you dare spew dirty words before you figure out the reason. Else, I'll beat you until you're obedient. After saying that, he then looked at the several people who looked surprised, cupped his fists and said, I'm new here, so I'm afraid I'll have to bother you for a few days. You can call me Xiu. Won't the 4 of you introduce yourselves? The burly man looked at Tan Xiu with a solemn expression. Tan Xiu's speed in dealing with Subtanshu had shocked him secretly. He was a ruthless character who once killed a tiger with his bare hands and even fought a polar bear. Dozens of enemies had died in his hands over the past decades. However, he could see at a glance that this Oriental kid was an expert. Xiu. What an interesting name. You're also very powerful. If you can knock down Emily, it proves that you have the capital to make us introduce ourselves. The muscular female prisoner coldly snorted and discontentedly said, K2, your balls retracted back into your stomach after seeing a powerful expert. You want me to fight him? Do you think it's interesting? K2 grinned and said, my balls indeed retracted back into my stomach in front of you. Emily, cut the crap and fight him. Let all of us see who can stand and talk in the end. Emily rolled her eyes and immediately looked at Tan Xiu. She hooked her finger and said indifferently, since this coward wants to see us fight, then it's better to let me warm up. Brat, I'll never break your legs. As for your hands, it depends on my mood. Tan Xiu shook his head and indifferently said, if you want to fight, I think this old man can fight me. As for you, I think you'd better forget it. The white-haired old man revealed a faint smile and meaningfully said, do you really want to fight me, kid? Do you want to bully this old man? Tan Xiu smiled and said, bullying you is better than beating some weaklings, no? Emily seemed to be insulted. She roared and instantly pounced toward Tan Xiu. Her speed was extremely fast, almost comparable to that of a martial arts grandmaster. Her fists whistled and appeared in front of Tan Xiu in an instant. She wanted to knock down Tan Xiu with one punch. Pa! Tan Xiu reached out to grab Emily's fist. His seemingly light punch instantly blasted out and directly hit Emily's face. After she screamed, her body was smashed 6 or 7 meters away and fell next to the bed of the young man who was reading a book. The white-haired old man's pupils contracted and the smile on his face disappeared without a trace in an instant. He looked at Tan Xiu with a solemn face, took a deep breath, and said, you're very strong, Xiu. I'm not your opponent. Because I can't beat Emily in one move. Anyways, let me introduce myself. Old Angie, you can call me that. Old Angie. Inside Tang Xiu's mind was the information about the prison's inmates that Sander gave him. According to the information, this old Angie used to be a mercenary, a terrifying man who had lived for decades on the battlefield under the rain of bullets. It was said that the number of humans he killed was definitely more than 3 digits. It's a pity that you're too old. You're not suitable to charge and break through the enemy lines. You can only be a guard at most. Tan Xiu said something that old Angie couldn't figure out. He then looked at the young man who had never looked up and lightly said, judging from your appearance, you should be an Asian. Which country are you from? The young man looked up for the first time. His fingers pushed the frame of his glasses and then gave Tan Xiu a shy smile. Zhang Xiaohua from China. Zhang Xiaohua. His information appeared in Tan Xiu's mind. The world's top hacker once wrote the most terrifying network virus, Spider, which caused a European country's network system to be paralyzed for 4 days and indirectly caused billions of dollars in losses to that country. The information also showed that he should have a special ability, because in the only time he killed someone, he killed 29 people with his bare hands, and then when he destroyed 16 buildings, he injured more than 140 people. Can you show me your special ability, Zhang Xiaohua? Tan Xiu asked in Mandarin. Zhang Xiaohua looked suspicious. After putting down the book in his hand, he leaned against the corner and looked at Tan Xiu, asking, you're also from China? That's right. Tan Xiu nodded. Then how do you know that I have a special ability? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. I've seen the criminal records of every one of the 1,260 people in this prison, including you, said Tang Xiu. Zhang Xiaohua stared blankly and asked with a confused expression, it's reasonable to say that the prison's criminal information is top secret. I'm afraid that only a few people can see it except for the prison's highest officer. I used the computer network to invade the prison's network system and read the prisoner's information. Are you also proficient in the network? Are you a hacker? I'm not a hacker, and I'm not proficient in the network. Tan Xiu shook his head. I think you're a talent, and it's a pity that you're staying here. Maybe I'll tell you the reason if you can get out of this prison. After saying that, Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had no intention to show his special ability, he didn't bother to pay attention to him anymore. After turning to look at Subtanshu, he sneered and said, "Just stay here and don't cause any trouble for me. Else, any one of these four can teach you a lesson. My grandma once told me that a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him." Subtanshu slumped to the side and leaned against the bed leg as he spread his hands and said. Tan Xiao nodded with satisfaction. He then turned around and walked to the cell's door. He fiercely kicked it, leaving a shallow footprint. A few seconds later, 2 prison guards rushed over. One of them fiercely whipped the iron window with an electric baton and shouted, "Behave yourself." "I want to see the prisoner on the opposite side," said Tan Xiao. "What?" The 2 prison guards outside the door were startled. They looked at Tan Xiao as though they were looking at a madman. Of course, it was not only the 2 prison guards, but also the original 4 prisoners in cell 000018. They looked at Tan Xiao as though they were looking at a madman. Is he courting death? The same thought emerged in everyone's mind at the same time. Because everyone in the entire prison knew that cell 000001 was on the opposite side. There was only one person inside, a guy who could be called a devil. Spectre. It had always been. No one dared to enter that cell, because those who had entered had turned into corpses. Chapter 808. Subtanshu had just been imprisoned in this prison, so he naturally did not know who was in cell 000001. Looking at the dull expressions of the prisoners, he asked loudly, "Why do you have such expressions? Do you think Xiao can't get out of here?" Old Angie glanced at him and said, "Every prisoner who is imprisoned here is like a bird with its wings cut off and a poisonous snake with its fangs broken. They have completely lost their freedom. Xiao is joking. He can't get out of cell 000018 before it's time for him to get some fresh air. Another reason is that cell 000001 is on the other side. There's only one way for anyone who goes in, and that is death. Even the prison guards are no exception." Subtanshu said incredulously, "Is there a monster on the other side?" Old Angie said, "It's not a monster, it's the devil." Tan Xiao laughed involuntarily. "To tell you the truth, I'm afraid of everything except the devil. The 2 of you, please open the cell door. I want to go to cell 000001 on the opposite side to see that demon." The 2 prison guards had received Sanders' order to allow Tan Xiao to walk around the prison. So they whispered a few words to each other. One of them took out a key, opened the cell door, and said, "If your body is thrown out of cell 000001 by the devil, we will collect your body." Tang Xiao couldn't help but smile in response. Under the dumbfounded expressions of the other prisoners in the cell, he strolled out of the door and directly entered the cell opposite him after the door was opened. Cell 000001 was very large, at least 50 square meters. There was only one bed inside, and it was a very high-end Simmons. In addition, there were all kinds of appliances inside. It was more like a small living room than a prison cell. In the cell, the ghost was lying flat on the bed with a book covering his face. It was unknown if he was asleep or not. Tan Xiao walked over, grabbed a chair, and sat down directly 2 or 3 meters away from the bed. He then crossed his legs and picked up a half-opened pack of cigarettes from the table. He took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a deep puff. As the smoke came out, he shook his head and said, "This cigarette is terrible. It's very choking." The ghost's fingers twitched, but then he calmed down again. However, the indifferent voice came from under the book. "Choking smoke can let people know that they are still alive. Cherish every puff of cigarette, because no one knows if you will be able to smoke another puff after this puff." Tan Xiao couldn't help laughing. "Why do I feel like you're not the famous devil Spectre from the legends, but more like a philosopher?" Clap, Spectre lifted the book and directly threw it to the side. He then sat up and leaned against the headboard. He folded his arms and observed Tang Xiao with a faint smile. You seem to be quite interesting, mister. At least, you're the only living person who dares to come to my place alone in the last 5 years. Now, I don't really want to kill you. Tan Xiu smiled and said, it seems like my personal charm is very strong. Ghost's face turned cold. A gust of wind instantly shot out from the gap between his fingers. The half-pack of cigarettes that Tan Xiu had put back on the table was rolled up by the wind and appeared in his hand. Ghost lit the cigarette and took a few puffs. Then, she asked, tell me, why did you come here? Tan Xiu said, to get you out of here. Spectre laughed out loud as if he had heard something extremely funny. Interesting. That's really funny. Someone actually wants to save me. Ha ha ha. Is there a problem? Asked Tan Xiu. Ghost looked at Tan Xiu as if he was an idiot and sneered, do you really think I can't get out of here if I want to? Tan Xiu nodded and said, according to my men, you do have the ability to escape, and it's quite easy for you to do so. I don't know why you want to stay here, but I believe that you'll be willing to leave with me and work for me in the future. Spectre squinted his eyes and suddenly waved his right arm. 3 sharp hidden weapons shot toward Tan Xiu's eyes and mouth. Tan Xiu casually raised his arm and gently flicked his fingers. 3 streams of air were released and smashed the 3 incoming airflows. Then, he said with a smile, so you're a wind attribute supernatural ability user. No wonder you have the capital to be so arrogant. Spectre's complexion slightly changed. His body flashed and his afterimages instantly appeared around Tan Xiu. Numerous wind blades emerged and the air suddenly turned a bit hot as a purplish-red flame appeared out of thin air and wrapped the wind blades. Die! The wind blades burning with purple flames blotted out the sky and rushed toward Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu fiercely punched out and an earth-shattering airwave spread out from his fist, forming a violent energy flow that bombarded the burning wind blades all over the sky. As the steel chair Tan Xiu was sitting on collapsed, Spectre's bed was also smashed, and the violent energy flow bombarded Spectre's chest. Bam! The reinforced concrete wall was smashed and a hole was made. The 2 prisoners in cell 000002 next door looked at Spectre, dumbfounded and tongue-tied. I didn't expect the quality of this wall to be so bad. Tan Xiu shook his head and smiled. Cough, cough. Blood spilled from the corner of Spectre's mouth. With a solemn expression, he stared at Tan Xiu and said, who are you? Where did you come from? Don't worry about where I came from. Tan Xiu waved his hand and said, we've already appeared in front of these 2. Let me teach them a lesson first, and then I'll deal with you. You too. Amos and Amotai, right? 2 fire attribute ability users. Amos and Amotai glanced at each other. Amos then coldly snorted and said, who are you? The law can't sentence you to death, but I can easily kill you, said Tan Xiu straightforwardly. So, I'll give you a chance. Choose to submit to me and be loyal and devoted subordinates. I can take you away if you want. But if you don't agree, I'll torture you for a day and a night and then kill you. Arrogant. Amotai bellowed angrily. 2 burning fire serpents wrapped around his arms appeared, and layers of flames immediately rushed toward Tan Xiu. The 2 fire serpents shuttled back and forth in the flames, attempting to kill Tan Xiu directly. Extinguish. Tan Xiu performed a hand seal, and the fire elements in the surrounding air instantly dissipated. The flames and fire snakes also disappeared without a trace under Amotai's great change of expression. Impossible. Amotai tried his best to sense the fire elements, but to his horror, he could no longer feel the slightest bit of fire elemental energy at this moment. If he couldn't feel the fire elemental energy, he wouldn't be able to use his ability. Amos also quickly sensed it, but the result was the same as Amotai's. He couldn't feel the slightest bit of fire elemental energy at all. This kind of strange situation caused him to feel horrified. He stared at Tan Xiu and sternly shouted, how did you do it? Tan Xiu sneered, I can summon the energy between heaven and earth at will as long as I want to use it. If I don't want them to exist, then even you, ability users, can't use even half of it. Tell me, are you willing to submit to me? Impossible. Amotai and Amos shouted in unison. Tan Shio didn't ask any more questions. With the release of a violent aura, his figure instantly dashed in front of the two. His lightning-like fists bombarded the two of them again and again. Although the two of them didn't have any abilities and were very strong, they were unable to fight back against Tan Shio's attacks. Ah, a blood-curdling scream came from cell 000002. All the prisoners and prison guards within 100 meters heard it clearly. However, the prison guards had received orders from their superiors not to care about what was happening here, so none of them came over. Prison monitoring room. Sanders stared intently at the surveillance screen, his eyes flashing with horror. Others might not know the strength of Amos and Amotai, but he was very clear about it. Because the two brothers were terrifying existences second only to Spectre, they were imprisoned in cell 000002. But these two terrifying guys were actually beaten by Tan Shio until they screamed again and again, looking extremely miserable. This made him look at Tan Shio's figure in the surveillance video as if he was looking at a monster. Warden, is this guy the devil? How can he be so powerful? A prison guard asked with a face full of shock. Sanders suddenly narrowed his eyes. He instantly pulled out a sharp knife and fiercely pierced the prison guard's heart. The two prison guards behind him suddenly killed the other two people in the monitoring room. In just a few seconds, all three prison guards in the monitoring room were killed. Call our people over. Keep a close eye on this monitoring room. No matter what happens in the surveillance video, don't let outsiders know, Sanders solemnly exhorted. Understood. The two prison guards immediately nodded. In cell 000002, Tan Shio violently beat up Amotai and Amos for several minutes in one breath. Only after the two were riddled with scars did he stop. He kicked them to the corner and coldly asked, "Tell me, are you willing to pledge allegiance to me in the future?" The two did not answer because they were unwilling to pledge allegiance. In that case, I'll continue to beat you. Don't worry. Tan Shio said. You have a day and a night to endure my beatings. Even if you are two pieces of steel, I will still beat you into steel juice. That's right, I forgot to tell you that you won't be beaten to death by me in this one day and a night, because one of my identities is a powerful doctor. Bam, as his voice faded, Tan Shio beat them again, even using his hands and feet. A few minutes later, he kicked them to cell 000001 next door. Spectre, on the other hand, frowned as he watched Tan Shio brutally beat up Amos and Amotai. All kinds of thoughts kept flashing in his mind. Chapter 809. Spectre never thought of himself as the world's most ferocious man. He had encountered many strong enemies during his decades as an assassin, some of which he had no choice but to flee. However, the terrifying strength of this young and handsome Oriental boy in front of him made him dread. He's too strong. Spectre was well aware of the strength of the two brothers. Even if he wanted to defeat the two brothers, it would not be easy for him to do so, let alone be as relaxed as Tan Shio. Suddenly, Tan Shio, who was beating up Amos and Amosai, turned to look at Spectre and asked, "Don't you think it's a bit boring to only rely on punches and kicks to beat them up?" Spectre narrowed his eyes and indifferently said, "It's indeed boring." A smile appeared on the corner of Tan Shio's mouth. He raised his hands in front of his eyes with his palms facing up. Suddenly, two crystal clear blue crystals appeared on his palms. The moment Amos and Amos had a bad premonition, the blue crystals were shot into their bodies by Tan Shio. Arg! Shrill screams came out of their mouths. After their bodies turned stiff in an instant, they curled up on the ground and twitched violently. Their facial features became distorted, blue veins bulged on their foreheads, and the blood vessels all over their bodies swelled up. The heart-wrenching pain made them taste a fate worse than death for the first time. Tan Shio turned to look at Spectre and said with a faint smile, now that I'm here, you must remember one thing. Those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. It's better to go out with me than to spend the rest of your life in this dark prison. Spectre took 2 steps back. Suddenly, the solemn expression on his face turned into a smile and he said, "If my guess is correct, you should be from China, right? I've studied your country's culture and read a sentence in a book, the body is in the Chow camp, but the heart is in the Han camp. I hope I'm not wrong. But how are you going to solve this problem? Also, you're killing the chicken to warn the monkey, aren't you? Unfortunately, it doesn't work on me. Even if I can't beat you, I'm afraid you can't stop me if I want to escape." Tan Xiu took out a jade bottle with a flip of his hand and indifferently said, "You overestimate your ability. If I don't want you to escape, you won't be able to escape from my palm even if you have wings. If you don't believe me, you can try." Ghost sneered and said, "I'll give you a chance. If you can catch up with me, I can choose to leave this place with you and see the outside world." Finished. A bolt of lightning flashed in his hand. After the steel door was cut open, he dashed out like a bolt of lightning. Soul Anchor Art. Tan Xiu cast a spell, and a hazy energy instantly rushed into Ghost's back. His body, which was about to rush out of the room, suddenly froze. At the same time, Tan Xiu quickly took out 4 formation discs from his interspatial ring and quickly set up the 4 symbols formation around Spectre. "Break for me!" Spectre's face turned red as he roared angrily. As the energy in his body surged crazily, the special energy collapsed and his stiff body instantly returned to normal. While laughing wildly inwardly, he dashed out of the room. Bam! Spectre's head collided with an invisible energy shield. The huge impact caused the energy shield in front of him to ripple, and his body was violently bounced back. When his back touched the energy shield again, he was bounced back to the ground. What the hell is this? The gloating feeling in Ghost's heart was extinguished by a cold and bitter feeling. He instantly bounced up from the ground and turned to look at Tan Xiu in disbelief. "An array," replied Tan Xiu calmly. Ghost exclaimed in horror, "You're a cultivator from China. Damn it. Don't tell me a dignified cultivator has nothing better to do. What the hell are you doing in this prison?" "I can tell you since you want to know," said Tan Xiu with a faint smile. "But you'll have no leeway after you learn about it from me. You can live if you submit to me, but you'll die in pain if you defy me." Spectre clenched his fists with a conflicted look in his eyes. After a long time, he shouted, "Speak. I'm going to form an army of cultivators, so I need a lot of powerhouses who can charge and break through the enemy lines for me," said Tan Xiu lightly. "My purpose in coming to Labor Camp 1319 is to buy a large number of prisoners, which can be considered as recycling waste." "I'm not a waste," shouted Ghost angrily despite being horrified by Tan Xiu's purpose. "You're nothing but a waste in my eyes," sneered Tan Xiu. "Don't think that you're the strongest assassin in the world of assassins, not to mention that you're a dual attributability user. You're just like an ant in my eyes. It's as easy as flipping my hand if I want to kill you. Also, let me tell you one more thing. Some of my men who came with me this time are much stronger than you. They can easily obliterate you even if I don't do it myself." "Are they also cultivators?" asked Ghost. "Yes," answered Tan Xiu. Ghost fell into silence. The anger on his face slowly subsided as he turned to look at Amos and Amosai, who were twitching on the ground. Then, he said in despair, "I can agree to follow you, but I also know that there's a saying in Huaxia that the emperor doesn't send hungry soldiers. What benefits can you give me?" The jade bottle in Tan Xiu's hand instantly entered the 4 divisions array and floated in front of Ghost. Then, he slowly said, "There are 2 pills inside. Even if you take one of them, it will greatly increase your strength. Of course, you need to understand immortal cultivation techniques before taking these 2 pills. I'll teach you that cultivation technique and make you become immortal cultivators." "I can become an immortal cultivator?" Ghost stared dumbfoundedly at Tan Xiu with eyes full of disbelief. Nothing is impossible in front of me. Tan Xiu nodded. Once you become an immortal cultivator, with diligent cultivation and the assistance of these pills, let alone your current strength, it won't be a problem for you to be tens of thousands of times stronger than you are now. I agree. Ghost's heart skipped a beat. Although he was a prisoner, his status in this prison was very special. Even the highest-ranking officer in the prison didn't dare to offend him. Although he was guilty, it would be very easy for him to leave this place if he wanted to. Even if he didn't want to be caught, there were only a few people in this world who could catch him. Coercion. It made him angry and unwilling. Temptation. This caused ecstasy to rise from the bottom of his heart. All these years, he didn't lack money, nor did he lack glory and splendor. If he wanted power, he could get it through his own means. If he wanted women, he could have countless of them. Now, all he wanted was to become even stronger. But now, even though he was being coerced, he was given an enormous opportunity. We also agree. Amos, who was curled up on the ground and twitching, suddenly raised his twisted face and squeezed out the words from his throat. Although Amos didn't speak, he also chose to agree inwardly. With a faint smile, Tan Xiu waved his hand and took back the 2 blue crystals. After Amos gradually calmed down, he removed the 4 divisions array trapping Ghost, turned around, and walked to a chair to sit down. Then, he said, I've read your information. I know that the 3 of you should be the strongest prisoners in the entire labor camp 1319. However, I want to build a cultivator legion, so I need a lot of men. I came to Tel Aviv this time, so I must take away at least 100 prisoners with good strength. 100? Do you want to raid the prison? Asked Ghost in surprise. I've always believed that there's no need to resort to force if the problem can be solved with money. Tan Xiu shook his head. Besides, my coming here is a secret, and I don't want outsiders to investigate me. So, I'll pay to buy you out. That's impossible. Ghost shook his head. Even if Augustino regards money as his life, he won't dare to sell that many prisoners at the same time. He indeed won't dare, but Gus Gillis does. Tan Xiu sneered. As long as we put the crime of selling prisoners on Augustino, not only can Gus Gillis' official position be promoted further, but he can also earn a sky-high fortune. Is this your arrangement? Asked Ghost with squinted eyes. That's right. Tan Xiu nodded. As far as I know, there's an ability user around Augustino. Ghost shook his head. He's very strong. Though he's a bit worse than me, many people are not his match. If you want to kill Augustino, you must kill that guy first. Since I've chosen to follow you, then I'll deal with the ability user around Augustino. Since he's a tough guy to deal with, then I'll send 2 people to help you. Tan Xiu said indifferently. The next thing I need to do is to stay in the prison and secretly select prisoners worthy of my purchase. If you 3 have any suggestions, you can tell me. All right. The Ghost nodded. The 2 brothers, Amos and Amos, exchanged glances and nodded at the same time. They had just endured inhuman torture and their internal injuries were not light. Hence, they were self-aware and didn't mention anything about helping Augustino deal with the ability user around him. Tan Xiu took out 2 holy healing pills and threw them to the 2 brothers, saying, "Take it and your injuries will recover in a short time. Also, you 2 brothers will each take a medicinal pill. You can take it after you learn an immortal cultivation technique from me in the future." "Thank you, call me boss from today onward," said Tan Xiu. "Thank you, boss." The 2 brothers replied again. Tan Xiu smiled indifferently. He didn't feel at ease subduing them like this, so he ordered them not to resist and cast a forbidden technique in their bodies, completely controlling their lives. At this moment, in the nearby cells, hundreds of prisoners heard the strange sounds coming from cell 000001. Although many of them were secretly surprised that someone had provoked the demon in cell 000001, no one dared to come out to take a look. However, the 5 people in cell 000018 on the opposite side knew that it was Tan Xiu who entered. What shocked them was that the scream just now didn't come from Tan Xiu's mouth, but rather, the 2 brothers in cell 000002. Chapter 8:10. For 3 days, Tan Xiu stayed in the prison and met with the prisoners. After learning about them, he finally drew up a list of 100 prisoners. However, after recalling Yuan Ye's request, he finally decided to pick some more. In any case, he had to make a big move this time. It didn't make much of a difference whether he picked 100 or 200 prisoners out of a prison of 1,000 or 2,000 prisoners. The subsequent selection of prisoners was much faster. On the 5th day after he entered the prison, he had finalized a list of 200 prisoners. In cell 000018, Tan Xiu read the list in his hand and then looked up. His eyes swept over old Angie, Emily, K2, and Subtanshu in the cell before finally landing on Zhang Xiaohua and lightly asked, "Have you thought it through? Do you want to go back with me?" Zhang Xiaohua still looked as indifferent as ever. Even though he learned that Tan Xiu wanted to buy 200 prisoners from the prison, he was only a bit surprised. He gently raised his hand to push the frame of his glasses and calmly said, "There's no difference between going out and staying here for me. I've already gotten used to living here, so why should I go out?" Tan Xiu was silent for a moment. He then shook his head and said, "It's really a pity that your heart is dead at such a young age. I won't force you since you don't want to go out." Zhang Xiaohua didn't speak again and his eyes fell back on the book in front of him. A disdainful look appeared on Subtanshu's face and he shouted, "I think he's out of his mind, boss. He doesn't enjoy the outside world and wants to stay here to suffer. I think he's just a fool." A cold glint flashed in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. A dazzling white light shot out from his fingers and instantly pierced Subtanshu's right shoulder. "Ouch! My arm!" Subtanshu screamed and instantly covered his shoulder with his left hand. He could clearly feel the stinging pain. He could no longer lift his right arm and even lost all feeling in his entire arm. A glint flashed in Tan Xiu's eyes. He just sensed a true essence fluctuation coming from Zhang Xiaohua. "Cultivators?" Tan Xiu narrowed his eyes and quickly grabbed Subtanshu's right arm. As his fingers moved, a sharp silver needle shot out from his right arm and was caught between Tan Xiu's fingers. "Are you a martial cultivator?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at Tan Xiu in surprise. He then smiled and said, "I didn't realize that you're also from Huaxia. Since he can even subdue specters, he should also be a cultivator." Tan Xiu took a step forward and appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua in an instant. As his fingers suddenly extended toward Zhang Xiaohua, the two of them exchanged dozens of blows in an instant. "Don't move," Tan Xiu growled. When he finally sealed Zhang Xiaohua's arms, he pressed his fingers on his shoulder. As the chaotic energy surged into Zhang Xiaohua's body, Tan Xiu's eyes revealed a look of surprise. Golden glaze body. Half-step golden core. The moment Tan Xiu released Zhang Xiaohua's arms, he spat out this sentence with a solemn expression. Zhang Xiaohua's expression suddenly changed. The moment his arms regained their ability to move, his figure flashed 7 or 8 meters away. With his back against the wall, he stared at Tan Xiu and said, "Who the hell are you? How can you see through my physique and strength?" "I once met a guy with a golden glaze body," said Tan Xiu. "But it's a pity that he died in the hands of some terrifying existence before he could grow up. As for your cultivation, it's just a joke in my opinion, even though you're only a step away from breaking through to the golden core stage." Having said that, a jade bottle appeared in Tan Xiu's hand out of thin air and he spoke again with a faint smile, "This is the nascent breaker pill I refined. It's the best auxiliary pill for a nascent soul cultivator to break through to the spirit formation stage. If you're willing to submit to me, leave this place with me and work for me in the future, this nascent breaker pill is yours." Zhang Xiaohua was aghast. He stared at the jade bottle and his body slightly trembled. He hadn't even reached the golden core stage, let alone the nascent soul stage and the spirit formation stage. But the appearance of this nascent breaker pill still set off a huge wave inside his heart. Who the hell are you? Zhang Xiaohua struggled to move his eyes away from the jade bottle and looked at Tan Xiu. You don't need to know who I am, said Tan Xiu with a smile. At least you don't need to know for now. You just need to know that it'll be easy for you to break through to the golden core stage, nascent soul stage, or even the spirit formation stage if you follow me. It's not impossible for you to ascend to the immortal world in the future if you have the aptitude. Ascend to the immortal world? Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed in alarm and immediately shouted, that's impossible. Who on earth can ascend to the immortal world? I don't think there's even a nascent soul cultivator, no? That's your ignorance. Tan Xiu sneered. I don't know who your master is, but I can tell you clearly that there's nothing impossible in this world as long as I, Tan Xiu, am here. Huff, huff, Zhang Xiaohua's breathing turned a lot more rapid and numerous thoughts churned inside his mind. Although he had nothing to worry about now and was disheartened by the death of his last family member, Tang Xiu's description made him see a little bit of a goal, a hope that he could make progress. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, last question. Why do you want to buy so many prisoners? To form an army of cultivators, answered Tan Xiu. Hiss, despite his tenacious mind, Zhang Xiaohua was still scared by Tan Xiu's answer. Forming an army of cultivators? What kind of joke was that? It was already extremely difficult for a cultivator to have a good cultivation level. How many resources would it take to form an army of cultivators? Even if all the resources on Earth were added up, it wouldn't be enough to provide for all the members of an army of cultivators, right? I'll go with you. After Zhang Xiaohua spat out those words, his entire body instantly relaxed. Tan Xiu paced a few steps forward and said in a deep voice, if you want to go with me, your life must be under my control from today onwards. But I can give you a chance to regain your freedom. If your cultivation can reach the perfected golden immortal stage in this life, I'll give you your freedom. A perfected golden immortal? Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and let out a self-deprecating smile. Perfected golden immortals were only existences in legends. At the very least, it was impossible for such a powerful immortal to appear in this space. The promise made by this future boss of his was really funny. Late at night. The electric iron gate of Labor Camp 1319 slowly opened as two bulletproof SUVs drove out from the inside. Tan Xiu, who was wearing a prison guard uniform, was sitting in the back seat of the second car with the prison's deputy warden, Gus Gillis, standing next to him. You've arranged everything? Gus Gillis felt restless and turned to look at Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu nodded with a faint smile and said, don't worry. I think Spectre, Jean Sher, and Xue Sha can deal with Augustino's subordinates. They'll come out with Augustino in half an hour at most. On the other hand, I'm a little worried about whether the people you arranged will be able to successfully bring the prisoners out. All the forged documents are stamped with Augustino's private and official seal, said Gus Gillis decisively. Even the other powerful figures in the camp won't dare to stop them easily. Once we receive the news that Augustino has been taken out of Labor Camp 1319, my people will immediately bring the 200 prisoners out. But the money? Tan Xiu crooked his finger and said, give me the computer. Gus Gillis handed the computer he had prepared earlier to Tan Xiu. After booting it up, he opened the transfer software and said, I've told you my account number. You can absolutely take away all the people inside as long as I receive the money. Tan Xiu let out a faint smile and quickly entered the account number. Then, he transferred $400 million to Gus Gillis's Swiss bank account. After the transfer was successful, he closed the laptop and said, the money has been transferred to your account. You can check it now. Gus Gillis made a phone call and confirmed that the money had been transferred to his account. He immediately nodded with satisfaction and said, it's been a pleasure working with you. But aren't you afraid of an accident by transferring the money to me before dealing with Augustino? Do you dare to covet my money? Asked Tan Xiu with a smile. Gus Gillis shuddered inwardly. He immediately shook his head and said, "To tell you the truth, I don't dare." "Don't worry." Tan Shio chuckled. "Augustino is just an insignificant nobody in my opinion. If we have a good cooperation this time, I think we'll have many more chances to cooperate in the future. At the very least, your prison should have a lot of death quotas every year, right? If you take good care of those prisoners and reduce the number of abnormal deaths, this quota will be the basis of our deal." "I understand," said Gus Gillis without hesitation. Labor Camp 1319, the Warden's Lounge. Augustino had already fallen asleep, and his very loyal ability user subordinate was quietly leaning against the door, drowsily. Nearby, there were also two of Augustino's trusted subordinates, who were holding guns and standing guard. Puff! Puff! With a flash of blood, two black shadows wrapped around the necks of the two strong men and silently reaped their lives. In the next moment, two dazzling sword lights tore the dark space and instantly appeared between the eyebrows and throat of the ability user. Enemy attack. The ability user's complexion drastically changed. Just as his figure suddenly dodged to the side, a big hand as hard as an iron clamp grabbed his neck. There was even a wind blade circling around that ability user's neck, constantly circling around. "Who are you?" Spectre let out a grim smile. He didn't answer the man's question at all and directly snapped his neck. As he threw the dead body to Jean Sure, who quickly rushed over, the wind blade easily cut the door open. Chapter 811. Inside the deathly silent room, Augustino slowly woke up from his sleep. His pupils suddenly shrunk when a chilling aura came from his neck and all the hairs on his body stood erect. What's going on? He once imagined that one day he would wake up with a butcher's knife on his neck. But that place was definitely not in the prison's lounge. He was very assured about the prison's defense system, but he was even more assured about his loyal ability user subordinate. Augustino's eyes followed the faint light shining in through the window and saw the corpse on the ground. It was his loyal subordinate. Spectre patted Augustino's cheek and said with a faint smile, "Sir Warden, I really don't want to stay in this prison anymore. I have many ways to escape, but I think it's the easiest to let you send me out. If you don't want to die, why don't you get dressed and send us out?" After Augustino saw Spectre's face, his heart was like falling into an ice cave, full of chills. In the entire labor camp 1319, if there was someone he feared, it would be this devil called Spectre in front of him. That's right. He was not a devil, but he was more like one. "You want me to send you out, Spectre? You don't have to kill my men, do you?" Augustino was aware of the crisis at this time, so he wanted to find out Spectre's real purpose by beating around the bush. Otherwise, even if he could safely send Spectre out, the final outcome would be him being brutally murdered. This was because there was nothing a bold guy like Ghost didn't dare to do. "I don't like trouble, and your men will only bring me trouble." Spectre sneered. "Most importantly, these two are my companions. I can easily go out, but they won't be so easy. Hence, I can only ask for your help." Augustino's complexion instantly turned ghastly pale and fear filled every corner of his heart. Everyone thought that he regarded money as his life, but few people knew that he was as shrewd as a fox. He felt that he still had some hope to survive if Spectre didn't explain. But since Spectre actually wasted his breath to explain, there was only one conclusion: there was a deeper hidden reason behind Spectre's desire to leave. "I just want to live, Spectre." Jean Sure strode to the front of Augustino. His iron pincer-like hand clutched the latter's throat and fiercely said, "Cooperate with us honestly if you want to live. Actually, as long as we leave, it doesn't matter whether we kill you or not. Of course, if you can give us some benefits, or give us some money to buy your life, then your chances of survival will be higher." "I will give it to you," Augustino said without hesitation. Spectre slightly furrowed his brows. His impression of Jean Sure and Xue Sha instantly worsened. He didn't expect Tan Shio's men to be so greedy. Oblivious to Spectre's thoughts, Jean sure placed the dagger on Augustino's waist and coldly snorted. Remember, the more money you have, the more likely you are to survive. He regards money as his life, Jean sure, said Spectre indifferently. If you don't want to complicate matters, you'd better not waste any more time. If you want money, there are many ways to get it outside. You're not short on money, are you? Jean sure grinned. Nope, answered Spectre. Since you're not short on money, then Shueisha and I will divide this guy's money, said Jean sure with a smile. We're both very poor, so poor that we're about to go begging. Spectre no longer paid attention to Jean sure. He could see that Jean sure and Shueisha were determined to fish out some money from Augustino, so his figure flashed and disappeared from the room. 10 minutes later, Augustino transferred $100 million to Jean sure's Swiss bank account. Then, under Jean sure and Shueisha's coercion, he sat in his car downstairs and was called by a prison guard to drive the car. The four of them quickly left the prison in the bulletproof car. At a fork in the road only 2 kilometers away from the labor camp 1319th gate, Tan Xiu quietly sat in his car and watched the car driving out of the prison's direction. Then, he said, "You can leave now, but the rest will depend on your ability." After saying that, he got off the car. He got off straight and watched the car drive away into the distance. Tang Xiu took out his mobile and dialed a cell number. "I'll drive the car over here." "Alright, 2 minutes. Mo's voice came out of the phone. 2 minutes later, the 4 passenger cars, led by 2 black SUVs, quickly arrived in front of Tan Xiu. As the cars stopped, Mo was the first to get off and respectfully asked, "When will the people inside come out, boss?" Tan Xiu squinted his eyes and said, "Half an hour at most. Once the time is exceeded, it means that something unforeseen has happened inside." "That's right, is the ship ready to leave?" "It's already waiting at the Portolua port." Mo nodded and said, "It's a passenger ship we rented. The ship's departure time is 4 hours later, but after we bribed the ship's owner, the ship that originally has a lot of passengers will only provide service to us. You'll be in charge of the return route." Tan Xiu nodded with satisfaction. "I don't want to run into any trouble on the way." Mo confidently said, "You can rest assured, boss. All the procedures for the ship are very complete, and the owner behind it is very powerful, so there won't be any problems. However, once the ship leaves this country, I'm afraid we'll have to find another way to leave. Find an isolated island in the sea through the GPS, said Tan Xiu. I must train those prisoners before taking them to Clam Island. Alright. While they were talking, he walked straight to the bulletproof car parked a dozen meters away. As the door opened, Tan Xiu glanced at Augustino and lightly said, "Act according to the plan. Don't make any mistakes." The despair in Augustino's eyes turned more intense at this moment. At this moment, he could already tell that Spectre and the others were definitely not just escaping from prison. In particular, the 4 passenger cars parked tens of meters away must be part of a huge conspiracy. "I've already given you the money. Spare my life." Tan Xiu stared blankly and frowned at Jean Sure. "We've been very poor recently, boss." Jean Sure grinned and said, "I'll give it to you after we get back after extorting $100 million from this guy." Tan Xiu couldn't help laughing and said, "You guys do have some means to extort so much money from this guy who treats money like his life. Forget it, you can divide it among yourselves." Jean Sure's smile turned brighter and he said with a flattering expression, "You're really generous, boss." "Cut the flattery." Tan Xiu cursed with a smile and then turned to leave. Augustino realized that Tan Xiu was the one with the most power here, so he quickly called out, "Please let me go. I can give you more money if you think it's not enough." Tan Xiu's pace halted. He turned around and sneered, "Do you think money is more important? Or human beings?" "Human beings are more important." Augustino didn't know what Tan Xiu was referring to, but he still replied without hesitation. "Human beings are more important." Tan Xiu chuckled and said, I think it's a good deal to exchange your life for 200 powerful prisoners in the prison. Money. We can earn it if we don't have it, but it'll be a big loss if we lose our talents. Do you think I'm right, Augustino? You want to raid the prison? Augustino exclaimed. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, we're too lazy to use such a laborious method like jailbreaking. Your prison's second-in-command received $400 million from me. I think it's very reasonable to sell 200 prisoners to me. But you can only be the scapegoat. Immediately after, Tan Xiu made a gesture to Jin Shi. Jin Shi stuffed Augustino's mouth and let him struggle and beg for mercy, too lazy to pay any attention to him. Inside the prison. More than a dozen prison guards opened the cell doors one after another and the prisoners inside came out. They didn't speak but looked excited as they followed the prison guards along the corridor toward the outside. Soon after, 199 prisoners left their cells and walked outside faster and faster under the curious gazes of many prison guards. What's the situation, Steve? A police officer in the prison had just come out of the room of a female prisoner. He hadn't even put on his belt when he looked at the prison guards who had already brought out a large number of prisoners. The prison guard's complexion slightly changed, but he still quickly raised a form and said, the warden personally issued an order to take them outside to do something. The warden is now waiting outside the prison. The police officer frowned and asked with a puzzled expression, they're all felons. It'll be a big problem if you send them out with just these people. I'll send 2 squads to help you escort them. Puff, a bearded foreign big man pulled out a steel nail from his waist and tore the officer's throat. He covered the officer's mouth with his hand and then pierced the officer's heart with the steel nail. Afterward, he kicked open the door of the room the officer came out from and directly threw the officer who was covering his throat inside. TSK, TSK. A female prisoner who was just raped. You've met a pervert, haven't you? This injury is very serious. The bearded man looked at the female prisoner who was curled up in the corner and let out a strange smile. The female prisoner was an Asian with a very thin and short stature, but she looked very pretty. Her complexion immediately changed when she saw the miserable appearance of the officer who had just raped her. She didn't bother to pick up her clothes to cover her sensitive parts and jumped down from the bed in the corner. She picked up a chair and fiercely smashed the dying officer's head. In just a few seconds, the officer's head was smashed. The bearded man didn't hurry to leave with the other prisoners. Instead, he crossed his arms and leaned on the door, letting out a strange smile and said, none of the prisoners locked up here are good people. This woman who looks like a chick is actually so ruthless. Not bad, not bad. Do you want to leave with us? The female prisoner looked up. Although her face was splashed with blood and brains, she didn't wipe it and asked, can you leave this place? Escape? Chapter 8:12. The bearded man had witnessed Tan Xiu's martial prowess. Even with his unruly character, he eventually succumbed to Tan Xiu's terrifying force. Therefore, he was glad that he could go out with Tan Xiu and no longer had to stay in this dark prison where there was no freedom to talk. Looking at the female prisoner who had just been humiliated, he grinned and said, you're lucky to have met us. But you must remember that we didn't meet tonight, and I'm not the one who told you that you can leave. After saying that, he no longer paid attention to the female prisoner and quickly disappeared into the fast-moving stream of people outside. Chen Yan was the name of the female prisoner. She used to be a ruthless and merciless fiend. She had been living abroad with her parents since she was a child. As a result, she faced a tragic fate due to the death of her parents when she was still a minor. She was adopted by a gang of underworld forces, trained, and eventually became a ruthless character who killed people without batting an eye. Unfortunately, her luck was very bad. The underworld forces she belonged to were purged by the government, and she was also imprisoned as an international fugitive. After being sent to labor camp 1319, she was even more desperate to find that this place was not a women's prison, but a hell where both male and female prisoners were detained together. She had strength, but she wasn't very strong. As a result, she was coveted by too many male prisoners for more than 4 years due to her good looks. If it weren't for her cell's boss, an old man who was over 70 years old, protecting her, she would have been tortured to death. But even so, the old man had no way to deal with the threats from the prison's police officers, and she was repeatedly humiliated by many police officers. Chen Yan looked at the flow of people in the corridor outside. She quickly put on her clothes and wiped the blood on her face with her hand. The moment she stepped out of the door, she was secretly shocked. She had been in prison for more than 4 years and found that the prisoners who were rushing outside were all very powerful characters in the prison. What the hell happened? She was a bit perturbed inside, but she still firmly strode forward and followed the flow of people outside. What shocked her was that they encountered more than a dozen sentries along the way, yet the flow of people was not stopped. Even the prison guard leading them smoothly escorted them to the outermost gate. Open the gate. Under the leadership of a police officer, more than a dozen prison guards looked at the dozens of prison guards guarding the gate and shouted, handing over forged passes to them. "Buddy, where are you going with so many criminals?" The expression of the prison guard at the door changed slightly as he hurriedly asked. "The warden has ordered us to fight in the underground boxing competition outside." "Why?" "You don't want to follow Warden Augustino's orders? Or are you jealous that our warden can make money?" "No, no, no. Open the door and let him go." As the electric iron gates slowly opened, more than 10 prison guards quickly left with the prisoners. When they stepped out of the prison gates, they finally revealed expressions of ecstasy, and they all sprinted towards the straight road in front of them. Chen Yan followed the flow of people. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect that she would be able to leave the prison alive in this life. Her face turned red, and her heart was filled with excitement. She moved faster and faster. However, to Chen Yan's surprise, so many prisoners escaped from the prison, but all of them ran along the main road in front of them. No one spread out in all directions. "Hey, where are we going?" Chen Yan deliberately slowed down and asked while walking side by side with a felon. The female convict looked at Chen Yan in surprise and immediately grinned. "You don't know where to go? Didn't the boss tell you?" "The boss?" Chen Yan was dumbfounded. How would she know anything about the boss? She could follow the flow of people because of the bearded man's reminder. After a moment of silence, she hurriedly said, "The boss only told me to go out, but he didn't tell me where to go." "But you seem to know where to go." The female convict quickened her pace and quickly replied while running, "Don't ask if the boss didn't tell you. Remember to run with everyone. There will be people waiting for us outside. Someone will pick us up." Chen Yan's expression slightly moved. Seeing that the female convict didn't want to say more, she could only suppress the confusion in her heart. Being able to escape from the prison alive was the most important thing for her, and she couldn't care about anything else. Less than 2 kilometers away from the prison gate, she clearly saw 2 SUVs and 4 buses in front of her with the help of the dim starlight in the sky. With his hands clasped behind his back, Tan Xiu watched more than a dozen jailers and more than 200 convicts quickly rushing over. As the jailers quickly approached, he nodded with satisfaction and said, "Your mission has been completed, everyone. The deputy warden should have told you what to do next. Here, I'd like to thank you for your cooperation. There's $10 million in those suitcases over there. Consider it a token of my appreciation." The leading officer looked ecstatic and respectfully saluted Tan Xiu. Then, he quickly took the suitcases with more than a dozen jailers and quickly disappeared into the distant night. "Boss!" 200 convicts quickly gathered in front of Tan Xiu. All of them had fiery eyes filled with deep worship. They still didn't know Tan Xiu's origin, but they were clear about 2 things. First, this future big boss was very strong, and he was definitely a man with eyes and ears everywhere. Otherwise, who would dare to buy 200 convicts from the world's strictest and most terrifying labor camp 1319? who had the ability to buy 200 convicts at once. Although they used to be extremely terrifying existences, they also had very high intelligence, so they knew very well how big of a sensation they would cause in the future after being sold today. Tan Xiu nodded with satisfaction and shouted, "First of all, I want to congratulate you for being able to leave this place alive. Also, I want to congratulate you for having a more wonderful life in the future. But remember my words, I'm the only reason you can live in the future. Alright, everyone, maintain order and board the buses one by one. We'll leave by water later since the liner is ready." Mo All paced 2 steps forward and said in a deep voice, "Line up into 4 teams and board the 4 buses." A few minutes later, all the purchased convicts boarded the buses. Just as Tan Xiu boarded one of the SUVs, Mo All strode to the window and whispered, "There's an accident, boss." "What accident?" Tan Xiu slightly furrowed his brows. "I just counted the number of people. Aside from Spectre, there should be 199 convicts who came out this time," said Mo All. "Spectre, Jin Shi, Shui Sha, and the others went on a mission together, so Spectre isn't here. However, I just counted the number of people and found that there are 200 of them. There's no sign of Spectre. There's one more." A strange expression appeared on Tan Xiu's face. "That's right, there's one more," said Mo All. A smile appeared on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth as he said, "All, take a few men and check the list. Find the extra person and bring him to me." "Understood." As the cars started, they headed to the distance. Mo All and the members of the escort team boarded one of the cars and began to examine the 4 cars according to the list. Inside the 3rd car, Chen Yan was a bit perturbed as she sat in the last row. Next to her were 2 female convicts. She even knew these 2 female convicts. They were very famous and powerful characters in the entire labor camp 1319. She had witnessed how ruthless one of them was. She once tore a black convict apart with her bare hands, so it was rumored that this female convict's sentence was 218 years. However, this was not the main reason why she was perturbed. What worried her was that the young man she just saw was definitely a very powerful figure. She didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse for her to be inadvertently involved in such a big incident. Shit! Chen Yan's expression suddenly changed. She saw 2 burly men holding a name list walking from the front to the back. Moreover, they were counting the number of people according to their ranks. What should I do? Chen Yan's mind was in a mess. She wanted to jump out of the window and escape, but the felons around her would never allow her to escape. It was very likely that they would capture or kill her on the spot. He Xiong took the list and counted the people in the last row. He then looked at the 5 female convicts and asked in a deep voice, "Tell me your name and prison number." "Ivy Cody, number 0001184. Kodori, number 0000634. Chen Yan took a deep breath and said, "Chen Yan, number 0000460. Wait a minute." He Xiong flipped through the list and carefully searched several times, yet he couldn't find Chen Yan's name. His sharp eyes stared at her and said in a deep voice, "Where the hell did you come from? Your name isn't on the list of prisoners we bought." Chen Yan steeled her heart and said, "I accidentally saw a lot of convicts coming out of the corridor, so I followed everyone out. I'm also very confused as to how I appeared here in a daze." "What?" He Xiong was stunned. Many convicts around also looked at Chen Yan with a strange expression. After He Xiong reacted, he immediately said, "Come with me." "Where to?" asked Chen Yan quickly. "To see the boss," replied He Xiong with an expressionless face. Following the phone call, the 2 SUVs in front stopped. When He Xiong brought Chen Yan to Tan Xiu's SUV's window, he respectfully said, "Boss, I brought her." Tan Xiu glanced at Chen Yan and lightly said, "Get in the car." Chen Yan walked to the other door with a worried expression. She opened the door and sat next to Tan Xiu. She didn't rush to speak, but her heart was tense, guarding against Tan Xiu's sudden attack. The convoy moved forward again. Tan Xiu took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it up and took 2 deep puffs. As he exhaled the smoke, he slowly said, "Shouldn't you give me an explanation?" Qin Yan's lips squirmed a few times. She shook her head and said, "I don't know how to explain myself. I'm also a bit confused about being brought here." Chapter 8:13. Everyone had their own fortuitous encounters. If one grasped this opportunity, they might be able to reach the heavens in a single bound. Tan Xiu had never expected that his act of purchasing prisoners would give Qin Yan such a great opportunity. Escape from prison? Immortal Ascension asked. After Tan Xiu figured out the whole story, he could only sigh inwardly. The first half of Qin Yan's life was rough, but the second half of her life was blessed. Although he hadn't read Qin Yan's file, the fact that she was imprisoned in labor camp 1319 indicated that she was once a sinful person. It also indicated that she had something outstanding about her. Since it's a coincidence, then stay. Tan Xiu didn't say anything after he cast a forbidden technique in Qin Yan's body. At this moment, Qin Yan felt like she was dreaming. She escaped from prison by a freak combination of factors and became Tan Xiu's subordinate in a trance. Suddenly, she was looking forward to her future life. Port of Puerto Lucia. A passenger ship was quietly docked at the port. Although the high spotlights illuminated the surroundings as if it was daytime, there were no signs of people in the entire port. However, on the bow deck of the liner, Yishir-san and Black Crow stood side by side, looking at the road in the distance. "He's here." With the illumination of the car lights in the distance, the expressions of the 2 people with excellent eyesight changed. They jumped off the bow and ran to the shore. When the car stopped in front of the 2 of them, they saw Tan Xiu walk out of the off-road vehicle and went forward to greet him. "Boss. Has everything been arranged?" Tan Xiu nodded. Yishir-san said, "It's all arranged. All the crew and attendants are in place. The liner can set sail at any time." Tan Xiu asked, "Don't worry. Jin Shi and the others hadn't returned yet, so they would set sail after they came back. Organize the prisoners that were brought out from the prison and have them wait on the boat." "Yes." It didn't take long before the 200 prisoners alighted from the bus. Many of them looked excited when they saw the brightly lit liner and ran towards it. For them, escaping from prison was equivalent to going to heaven, and this kind of large luxury liner was even more popular. Tan Xiu did not stop the prisoners from cheering, nor did he care about their disorderly behavior. Because he knew very well that this might be the last time they would run together in such a chaotic manner. Once they found a deserted island and underwent his cruel training, they would not even be willing to run around in such a chaotic manner. Half an hour later, everyone was settled on the ship. Every prisoner from the prison was given their own cabin. Everyone was given a lot of wine, food, and fruit. Even in the gambling hall of the liner, which was originally provided for guests to gamble, there were many people gathered together to gamble. Even though they were in prison, almost everyone had their own private stash. Now that they were released, they directly used promissory notes as chips. The entire interior of the liner had been turned into a foul atmosphere by these lawless fellows. As a result, the crew members and attendants on the liner had to carefully avoid these people. On the liner's bow deck, Tan Xiu was quietly waiting for Spectre, Jin Shi, and Xue Sha. As time went by, at 4:30 in the morning, 3 figures flashed lightning fast from a distance and stood in front of Tan Xiu in just a few breaths. "It's all done, boss." Jin Shi cupped his fists and reported. "Is Augustino dead?" asked Tan Xiu. "He was shot to death by the police of this country," said Jin Shi. More than a dozen prison guards who escorted the prisoners out also died in the fierce battle after they joined us. "Don't worry. Even if some of the prison guards didn't die after being shot, I'm afraid they won't be able to be saved after being shot by us." Tan Xiu nodded and gestured to Mo all behind him. Then, he said, "Let's go." Let's try to leave this country's sea area as soon as possible. We can find a deserted island to temporarily station when we enter the international waters. Jade can't be made into tools if it isn't cut and polished. Those prisoners who were brought out from the prison need to be hammered. How do you want to train them? Asked Spectre. Tan Shio glanced at him and lightly said, the rest must undergo cruel training except for you. Only 100 of the 200 prisoners will be left after the training is over. Spectre was shaken inwardly and fell into silence. Inside the liner, Gillen Toma quietly sat on the bed, watching the coast outside through the window. He was a prisoner, a felon who had been sentenced to 180 years in prison. He originally thought that he would die of old age in prison, but he didn't expect that he still had the possibility to come out alive. He longed for freedom more than anyone else. Although Tang Xiu said that there was a seal inside his body, he didn't believe it at all after he was rescued from the prison. He firmly believed that, my fate is up to me, not the heavens. He was extremely unwilling to be restrained, so he had already come up with a plan. After leaving the prison, he would immediately find a way to escape. Even if Tan Xiu, the one who rescued them, was omnipotent, the world was a big place. As long as he concealed his identity, he could live a low-key and carefree life. I gotta escape. Gillen Toma took a deep breath and sat up on the bed. He opened the door and quietly walked towards the stern of the ship. After investigating, he finally avoided many people and came to the stern. He quickly left the cabin and appeared on the stern deck. Hee, you want me, Gillen Toma, to pledge allegiance to you? Dream on. The person who can become my boss in this world hasn't even been born yet. Gillen let out a strange laugh and instantly jumped out of the ship. During the fall, his palm easily grabbed the iron chain hanging on the hull and quietly slid into the water. In the night, Gillen Toma moved stealthily in the pitch-black seawater. He swam 100 meters in one breath, and only then did he poke his head out of the light. However, in order to escape, he didn't dare to lower his guard. He swam into the distance while trying not to make a sound. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two hazy figures appeared at the stern of the ship where Gillen and Toma had jumped off. Shui Gue and Yishir-san looked at each other with a smile on their faces. Boss is right. There will be people who think that boss's seal is just to scare people. They won't be willing to be controlled by boss and will jump into the sea to escape when the liner is about to set sail. Water Ghost, the water is your territory, so you should bring him back. Yishir-san said with a smile. Shui Gue smiled proudly and rushed out like a cannonball. He stepped on the water and chased in the direction where Gillen escaped. When he was only 100 meters away from Gillen, he directly sank to the bottom of the water and swam to catch up. After entering the liner, Tan Xiu directly went to the gambling hall. Although many prisoners saluted him, they were almost perfunctory. Many of those who escaped from prison were only afraid of Tan Xiu because of his formidable strength, but they didn't have much respect for him. Interesting. Tan Xiu knew that it wasn't easy to subdue these unruly characters, so he didn't care about it. He quietly walked to the bar and asked the pale waiter for a glass of red wine. He gently took a sip and then shook the glass while looking at the crowd, thinking about how to give them a show of strength. Not long after, Yishir-san hurriedly came to Tan Xiu's side and whispered, one of the prisoners escaped, boss. Shui Gue went to chase him and should bring him back later. This is getting more interesting. A strange smile appeared on Tan Xiu's handsome face. He gulped down the red wine in his glass and then slammed the glass on the floor and shouted, notify everyone to gather here immediately. I'll give you only 10 minutes. If anyone doesn't come within 10 minutes, I don't think he needs to leave with us. Understood. Mo Ao and the other 4 quickly disappeared from the gambling hall. Time passed. As time went by, more and more felons who had been rescued from the prison arrived one after another. Excluding Ghost, 195 felons had arrived when the 10-minute time limit was about to be reached, 20 seconds left. Tan Xiu stood on the bar and a Mitsubishi Army knife silently appeared in his hand. Get the fuck away. A rough voice came from outside the door of the gambling hall. Chen Yan, who was late, staggered into the door. When she steadied herself, she glared angrily at the burly man, who was bare-chested and covered with scars and tattoos, who came in behind her. "Close the door," Tan Xiu shouted in a deep voice when the 10-minute time limit was up. As the gambling hall's door was closed, Tan Xiu scanned the place with his spiritual sense and immediately shouted, "All, go catch Yale Sass and Jidi." Understood. Mo All silently mourned for Yale Sass and Jidi inwardly as he quickly walked outside. A few minutes later, Mo All grabbed the two men by their necks and dragged them into the gambling hall. Finally, he threw them in front of the bar where Tan Xiu was. "Damn bastard. If it wasn't for a sneak attack, this big daddy would have kicked your balls." Yale Sass had a fiery temper and was a notorious troublemaker in labor camp 1319 who liked to stir up trouble. Few people dared to contradict him due to his formidable strength. Mo All's expression turned cold, and he dashed towards Yale Sass like an arrow, kicking him in the face at lightning speed. As blood spurted out, a dagger appeared in Mo All's hand out of thin air, and he stabbed it into Yale Sass's shoulders at lightning speed, leaving 2 bloody holes. "Bastard, bam!" Just as Yale Sass was about to curse again, Mo All punched him in the mouth. Even though Yale Sass had tough teeth, they were still broken by the punch. "Kneel." Tan Xiu sat cross-legged on the bar, indifferently watching the beaten Yale Sass and Jidi. Tang Xiu made up his mind to teach them a lesson in front of these felons who had committed heinous crimes, so that they would remember his terror. Chapter 8:14. Yale Sass wiped the blood from his mouth with his arm and stared at Tan Xiu with provocative eyes before he slowly crawled up from the ground. The unruly expression on his face caused a large number of prisoners in the surroundings to applaud loudly. It was obvious that they were ready to watch a good show. Jidi, on the other hand, looked gloomy and sneered, "Even if you saved us and made us swear loyalty to you, you can't humiliate us, can you?" "Humiliate you?" Tan Xiu sneered. "Do you think you have the qualifications to be humiliated by me? Don't forget that your lives are in my hands. If I want to kill you, I can make your souls scatter and never reincarnate with just a thought." "I know you're very strong," said Jidi in a deep voice. "You can even make Spectre bow his head. I really admire you for that. In my eyes, this world is one where the strong prey on the weak. You're stronger than us and even rescued us from prison, so we're willing to follow you. But don't be too arrogant. We only promise to follow you and do things for you, but you can't let us fall into another cage." "Humph," Tan Xiu snorted coldly. The Mitsubishi Army knife in his hand instantly shot out and pierced Jidi's heart in an instant. The Mitsubishi Army knife even came out from Jidi's back and then circled around his neck, neatly cutting it off and sending his head rolling to the ground. "What?" Aside from Spectre, Amos, and the Amos brothers, the other nearly 200 prisoners had their expressions drastically changed. The smiles on their faces froze and their bodies instantly tensed up with disbelief in their eyes. Even though they were all extremely vicious people, a powerhouse like Tang Xiu, who would immediately kill them without a word of disagreement, was still shocking to them. Tan Xiu looked at Yale Sass again and indifferently said, "Between death and absolute obedience, which one will you choose?" The anger that filled Yale Sass' heart instantly faded away. He was shocked by Tan Xiu's terror, but he was even more horrified by Tan Xiu's cruelty. However, to be intimidated in front of so many people like this made him lose face. "I can obey your orders, but you must give us respect. I don't think you'll let us all die here since you've spent so much effort to save us, right?" Tan Xiu smiled and shook his head. As he formed a seal with both hands, monstrous flames instantly appeared around Yale Sass. It was as if Yale Sass was surrounded by invisible gasoline. The raging flames enveloped him and burned him unscrupulously. "Ah!" A blood-curdling scream came from Yale Sass' mouth. As he struggled to jump and roll on the ground, the flames burned even more vigorously. Tan Xiu took out a cigarette and lit it up. He took 2 puffs and then sneered, "You want to talk about respect in front of me? It was simply laughable. You should have been tortured to death in labor camp 1319. You should have died of old age there. This is the second life I gave you, so you must obey my orders. Furthermore, in my eyes, all of you are just a bunch of ants. Do you think that ants are worthy of respect in the hearts of humans?" The rolling sound waves instantly spread to the ears of everyone present. In an instant, the onlookers were shocked by Tan Xiu's cruelty and terror, but they were also angry at Tan Xiu's humiliating words. They dared not speak out despite their anger and could only watch helplessly as Yale Sass was burned to ashes by the raging flames. Bam! The door of the casino's lobby was pushed open, and everyone looked toward the entrance in an instant. Water Ghost, who was carrying the dripping Gillen Toma, came to Tan Xiu and respectfully said, "I caught this guy who wanted to escape, boss." After saying that, he directly threw Gillen to the ground. Tan Xiu nodded with a faint smile. He looked at Gillen, who jumped up from the ground and asked, "I spent some effort to rescue you from prison, and you promised to be loyal to me. How could you go back on your words and want to betray me and escape?" Gillen was shocked when he saw Jidi's body on the ground. However, he still gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. You did rescue us. But everyone has their own ambitions. What I need the most is freedom, not to be bound by someone. I'll naturally repay your kindness in the future, but I won't hand my life over to you." A smile appeared on Tan Xiu's face, and it became more and more brilliant. He looked at the serious expression on Gillen's face and applauded. "That's right. You do need freedom." Gillen looked happy and hurriedly asked, "Are you willing to let me go?" "Of course." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "Not only will I let you go, but I'll also take you to a heavenly place." Gillen looked ecstatic and turned around to stride toward the casino's entrance under the watchful eyes of everyone. Tang Xiu flicked the cigarette butt away and said in a clear voice, "I told you that every prisoner I bought from prison will forever be under my control for the rest of their lives. I also told you that I've cast a seal inside your bodies. I can scatter your souls with just a thought and you'll never be able to reincarnate." Huff! A gust of wind appeared out of thin air and lifted Tan Xiu's body to float a meter high in the air. He then placed his hands behind his back and coldly shouted, "Die." Gillen, who was quickly walking outside, suddenly turned stiff. A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth and his body softly fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Spectre, who was not far away, had a change in expression. He flashed to Gillen's side and put his finger on Gillen's nostrils. Half a minute later, he struggled to get up from the ground and cupped his fists like Mo and the others did, saying, "Spectre will always be loyal to you, boss." He's dead. Nearly 200 prisoners in the hall of the casino looked at Gillen Toma's corpse in horror. Tang Xiu controlling the Mitsubishi Army knife to kill Jidi and burning Yale Sass to death were still within the scope of what they could bear. But after Tang Xiu's words, Gillen and Toma died without any warning, causing their minds to be thrown into chaos. Could it be, is what he said true? Can he really control our life and death? Even if he can kill us with just a thought? Nearly 200 prisoners slowly shifted their eyes to Tan Xiu, who was hovering in the air. They cupped their fists with a fearful look and spoke in a surprisingly uniform voice, "We'll always be loyal to you, boss." Tang Xiu nodded with satisfaction and casually said, "No matter how good your words are, it's useless. What I need to see is your actual actions. Of course, I don't mind being betrayed. No matter where you flee to, I'll kill you immediately with just a thought." "How did you do it, boss?" asked Spectre. "I've cast a restriction spell on your bodies before, directly engraving it in your hearts," said Tan Xiu. "You're too weak, so I can clearly feel that you're under my control, but you can't feel it. Just wait. When your strength advances by leaps and bounds and reaches a certain level, you'll be able to feel how terrifying it is." All the prisoners were frightened. Their faces turned pale, and fear appeared in their eyes. It was at this moment that they truly realized the tragic end of going against Tan Xiu's will. Tan Xiu looked at everyone's faces and felt more and more satisfied. He even wanted to thank these three reckless guys. If it weren't for them, how could he have had the chance to make an example out of them? How could he really make these once unruly people behave? However, blindly intimidating them wouldn't achieve the best effect at this time. Only by combining kindness and might could he truly subdue their hearts. Therefore, Tan Xiu looked around and spoke again, "You don't need to worry. I'm not the kind of person who will kill the innocent, nor will I kill you easily. As long as you're loyal to me, not only will I not harm you, but I'll also reward you instead. When we arrive at the next temporary station, I'll teach you an immortal cultivation technique. As long as you practice diligently, your strength will advance by leaps and bounds in the future. You'll be thousands of times stronger than you are now." Although Qin Yan's parents were Chinese, they had lived abroad since childhood and had never heard of the existence of immortal cultivators. Therefore, she plucked up her courage and asked aloud, "What is an immortal cultivation technique, boss? How should we practice it? Also, you said, if we practice diligently, can we really be thousands of times stronger than we are now? As for what an immortal cultivation technique is and how to practice it, don't be impatient. You'll naturally know when we arrive at the next temporary station," said Tan Xiu. As for whether you can be thousands of times stronger than you are now, that will depend on your own efforts. "I'll definitely work hard, boss," said Qin Yan aloud. Tan Xiu nodded. He had a bit of a favorable impression toward this lucky woman. After deterrence, he casually said a few more words and directly left. As for the two corpses on the ground and the pile of ashes, Jin Shi and the others disposed of them. Previously, because Tan Xiu was about to take action, the waiters who were asked to leave were brought back here. However, Tan Xiu's last few words ordered them not to make things difficult for the waiters here, so their attitude toward the waiters was much better. Some desperados even planned to take the beautiful waiters back to their rooms to vent their anger. But now, they didn't dare to have such thoughts anymore. Women. They were everywhere in the world, but they only had one life. If they were killed by Tan Xiu because of insulting the waiters on the liner, it would be a loss that would outweigh the gain. Dawn came. In just a few hours, all countries in the world learned of a sensational event. The warden of the labor camp 1319 abused his power for personal gain and organized the prisoners to go out to fight in the black market boxing tournament, which eventually led to the successful escape of 201 prisoners, and their whereabouts were now unknown. Chapter 8:15. The barren island in the vast sea covered an area of less than 10 kilometers. The entire island was covered with forests and the highest peak was nearly 100 meters high. Due to the high temperature here, the island was lush all year round. "Let's set foot on the island." After the liner docked on the shore, Tan Xiu trod on the air and took the lead to set foot on the island under the shocked and fanatical eyes of the prisoners. Mo and the rest followed him and stood in a row on the beach. As for the prisoners bought from the prison, they were like scattered sand that swarmed to the shore. With his hands clasped behind his back, Tan Xiu stood in the air and said in a deep voice, "All, the duty of the 11 of you is to organize them. I'll give you 2 days. I want to see them in an orderly formation and strict discipline. Of course, you don't need to pay attention to anyone who dares to disobey your orders. Just tell me when I come back and I'll make them die here." Mo knew that Tan Xiu wanted to eliminate a batch of people here, so he deliberately asked aloud, "Boss, do you want elite soldiers? Or do you want to casually train them?" Tan Xiu instantly understood his meaning and shouted in a deep voice, "The subordinates of this Tan Xiu are naturally elite soldiers. You all know the law of the jungle. The weak are prey to the strong, and the weak survive. I can tell you without concealing anything. Apart from the 3 who have already died, there are still 197 of you left. However, the number of people I can take away from this island will not exceed 150. In other words, if there are too many people who can't adapt to my training, the number of people who can leave this deserted island alive will not exceed 100. A burly black man hurriedly asked, "We want to know the elimination criteria, boss." "That's a good question," Tan Xiu said with satisfaction. The elimination criteria are actually very simple. Those who don't obey orders will be eliminated, those who don't train hard will be eliminated, those who kill each other will be eliminated, and those who try to escape will be eliminated. The burly black man quickly asked, "Isn't the final elimination criteria based on individual strength, boss? Some of you are strong and some are weak." Tan Xiu sneered. "It's too shallow to judge based on martial strength. If I remember correctly, some of you are just ordinary people who are more powerful in a certain aspect. But in a certain aspect, it wasn't force. If we eliminate them just like that, it's definitely not respecting their talents." At this moment, almost everyone understood what Tan Xiu meant. They firmly remembered the 4 elimination criteria that Tan Xiu mentioned in their hearts and agreed loudly. Tan Xiu looked at Spectre and lightly said, "You don't need to participate in the training. Come with me to the island. I need to use an array to hide our tracks." Array formation. Ghost's heart skipped a beat. He had heard of the legendary formation and witnessed its power. Back in prison, Tan Xiu had used an array to trap him. 2 days later, Tan Xiu had shrouded the deserted island with an array formation. If seen from the outside, it would still be the same deserted island, but the situation inside could not be seen clearly. Such an illusory array made Spectre feel nothing but shock. It was because he had witnessed Tan Xiu's attainments in arrays that his admiration for Tan Xiu deepened. He couldn't wait to get his hands on a cultivation technique and possess these mysterious and unfathomable abilities. Very good. When Tan Xiu returned to the crowd with Spectre, he looked at the neat and tidy formation of 5 people with a satisfied look on his face. Under the threat of death, the unruly prisoners all tried their best to cooperate and train seriously. Back on the liner, Tan Xiu had instructed them to teach everyone the acupoints and meridian routes of the human body, and Mo and the others had done so. Imparting cultivation techniques. It was supposed to be a simple task, but due to the large number of people, it took Tan Xiu several days to impart the cultivation technique to everyone. On the coast, Tan Xiu stood in the air and said in a deep voice, "I have taught you everything that should be taught. I don't care what special abilities you once had. As long as you can reach the early stage of qi cultivation first, you can get an elixir from me. There are only 10 places. I hope you will work hard." 10 places. Suddenly, everyone's spirits were lifted, and their eyes showed a determined look. They wanted to become stronger and be able to fly in the sky like Tan Xiu. Hence, they secretly made up their minds to cultivate diligently and strive to be ranked in the top 10. In the following days, the training was extremely arduous. Although Tan Xiu gave everyone a few hours of qi sensing time every day, most of the time was spent on physical training. 10 days later, everyone was tortured by the huge amount of physical training. There were even a few who couldn't hold on and wanted to escape, but were eventually killed by Tan Xiu. 20 days later, the survivors had gradually adapted to the cruel training. Although the training would increase every 2 days, they were able to grit their teeth and persevere. A month later, apart from Spectre, only 182 people were still alive. But in just a month of cruel training, almost everyone was reborn, and their mental appearance was completely different from before. Unfortunately, for a whole month, only 5 people could sense the qi sensing in their bodies and could skillfully control the qi sensing according to the circulation route of the cultivation method. They could be considered to have stepped into the early stage of qi cultivation. These 5 people were Spectre, Amos, Amosai, and Zhang Xiaohua. As for the last person, Tan Xiu was greatly surprised. She was Qin Yan. "Are you sure you can control the qi sensing in the meridians according to the cultivation method I taught you?" Tan Xiu looked at Qin Yan's thin face and asked in a deep voice. "I'm sure," said Qin Yan. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment and asked again, have you practiced a similar cultivation method before? Does Qigong count? Asked Qin Yan. In an instant, Tan Xiu understood why Qin Yan could break through to the early stage of qi cultivation so quickly. Practicing Qigong was also a way of cultivation, but the level of the qi practicing qi was very low. But no matter how low the level was, Qin Yan had the foundation. When she transformed the qi practicing qi into true essence and familiarized herself with the control, she finally became a cultivator at the early stage of qi cultivation. Whoosh! A figure flashed lightning fast from the distant coast and stood in front of Tan Xiu in just a few breaths. With a respectful face, Shui Gui reported, after this month's investigation, a total of 66 reconnaissance aircrafts and 124 military helicopters have passed over our airspace, with a total of 52 cruises. In addition, a total of 23 warships have passed the vicinity, with a total of 14 round-trip trips. Only 2 warships have passed by in the last week, and there are no more reconnaissance aircrafts and military helicopters. Tan Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said, continue with the investigation. We'll leave this place in a week. Tell O to come here. I need to ask him something else. Understood. Shui Gui replied and disappeared in front of Tan Xiu. A few minutes later, O, dressed in a black uniform, quickly appeared in front of Tan Xiu. Without waiting for Tan Xiu to ask, he respectfully said, Boss, we've got a clear picture of the search intensity of various countries through our contacts with the outside world. We also learned about the situation of the prison in Israel. Tell me about it, said Tan Xiu. After a month of searching, the temporary search teams set up by various countries have been withdrawn one after another, said Moo. Only Israel and a few surrounding countries are still searching. We may run into a bit of trouble if we leave now. Further, our plan wasn't very successful. The prison's deputy warden wasn't promoted to a warden but transferred out of labor camp 1319 instead. He's still being interrogated by interrogation experts from various countries. As for Gus Gillis, he also sent us a message. His men have suffered a lot of losses due to the government's efforts to clean up the underground forces. Our original plan to help him become the boss of Tel Aviv's underground forces will have to be put on hold for the time being. He wants to ask us for our contact information. Tell him to keep a low profile for half a year. Tan Xiu shook his head indifferently and said, our people will naturally go to help him after that. As for the contact information, there's no need to give it to him. Understood. Mo agreed. Inform them to stay here for another week and then we'll immediately evacuate, said Tan Xiu again. Boss, there's a message from the liner, said Mo hesitantly. They said that the food stored on board has almost been consumed and they need to replenish it. We haven't eaten the food stored on the liner ever since we landed on this island, said Tan Xiu with a frown. How can it be consumed so fast? It's reasonable to say that there are only about 20 crew members and attendants on board, and the food stored on board is enough for them to eat for several months. I've asked about it. The reason is that a lot of the food has rotted and been discarded due to the hot weather, said Mo with a forced smile. The weather? Tan Xiu's expression moved and he immediately forced a wry smile inwardly. He didn't expect that he had overlooked this reason. After giving it a thought, he directly said, go tell the captain that we'll hunt on this island and let them find a way to fish some fish. We'll definitely have enough food for everyone for half a month after 7 days. Understood. Mo nodded. The last 7 days. Everyone's training was suspended. Under the leadership of Mo and the others, the 5 teams were divided into 5 groups and began to hunt on the island. Although the island was not large, there were a lot of wild beasts on it. Most of the food eaten by everyone these days was from the prey they hunted, but the number of wild beasts on the island was still a lot. Finally, on the 7th day, news came from the liner that the meat reserves were enough. If they could be preserved for a long time, they would have enough food for the next half a month. Upon receiving the news, Tan Xiu immediately ordered to stop hunting and return to the liner. During these 7 days, he also quietly hunted a large number of wild beasts and put them all into his interspatial ring. Even if the beasts' carcasses on the liner had rotted for many days, the carcasses in his interspatial ring were enough for everyone to eat for some time. Chapter 8:16. South China Sea, Clam Island. When a large freighter docked at the northern port, Yuan Yi, who had received the news in advance, had been waiting for a long time. He stood tall and straight as he saw Tang Xiu floating down from the ship. He hurriedly walked forward a few steps and greeted, "You're finally back, boss." Tang Xiu let out an indifferent smile and said, "I was a bit delayed on the way back because my previous actions were a bit too big. I've brought the people you need. Tell them to stay here and help you later." Yuan Yi looked pleasantly surprised and quickly asked, "Where are they?" Tang Xiu turned around and quietly waited for several seconds. Then, he raised his arm and pointed to the direction of the freighter and smilingly said, "It's them." Yuan Yi looked at the direction where Tang Xiu's finger pointed. When he saw a line of men and women, Caucasians, blacks, and Asians lined up, the expression on his face suddenly turned extremely marvelous. After a few glances, he looked at Tang Xiu and forced a smile. "Are you kidding me, boss? We must train these children into the most elite cultivators and build an army of cultivators. Where did you get so many foreigners? Do they know how to cultivate immortality?" Tang Xiu nodded and said, "I've taught them immortal cultivation techniques. 5 of them have already entered the early stage of qi refining. Give them some time and use some cultivation resources on them. I believe it won't take long for most of them to become immortal cultivators." Yuan Yi helplessly said, "They are all beginners, boss. How can they teach others?" "You." Tang Xiu raised his hand and said, "Don't you want to know their origin?" "Origin?" Yuan Yi stared blankly for a moment. With a confused look, he looked up at the foreign men and women coming down from the freighter. 10 seconds later, his pupils suddenly shrunk and a light burst out from his eyes. A few familiar faces were clearly captured by him. "Boss, where did you find these demons and ghosts? These bastards?" Tang Xiu raised his hand to interrupt Yuan Yi and thoughtfully asked, "Do you know them?" Yuan Yi groaned weakly and said with a wry smile, "I know a few of them. Some of them are my friends who fought alongside me, and some are my enemies on the battlefield. As for the other 2, although I haven't had much contact with them, they're also extremely vicious people. None of them are easy to deal with. They're prisoners I bought from Israel's labor camp 1319, said Tang Xiu with a faint smile. I used some means to subdue them. They will be the peripheral members of our everlasting feast hall in the future. Except for Spectre, the rest will be under your management." Hiss, even though Yuan Yi had a strong will, he was still shocked by Tang Xiu's words. A horrified look flashed in his eyes as he hurriedly asked, "Labor Camp 1319 is the most terrifying large-scale prison in the world. All the prisoners there are highly dangerous felons, and nearly all of them are sentenced to at least 100 years. Boss, you actually bought so many criminals from there?" Tang Xiu laughed and said, "Money makes the world go round. It's not difficult to do it by using some means and flexing your muscles." Yuan Yi suddenly understood, but he still forced a smile and said, "Boss, you're really making things difficult for me by giving me this group of demons and monsters. Although I'm confident that I can defeat them, they are unruly and ruthless. It's too difficult to manage them. All of their lives are in my hands," said Tang Xiu. "Anyone who dares to disobey your order will only meet a dead end. My request is that when you train those children, you train them as well. According to the harshest military management in the world, strive to grind down their unruly characters as soon as possible so that they can become qualified members of the everlasting feast hall." Yuan Ye's expression moved and he immediately said, "Then, there's no problem." Tang Xiu took a deep breath and slowly said, "Keep in mind that you must repeatedly brainwash them when you manage them. Make them pledge their loyalty to the everlasting feast hall and me. I don't want their joining to affect the internal harmony of the everlasting feast hall in the future. I'll do my best, said Yuan Yi with a forced smile. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment before he suddenly said, I'll leave Zidane, Feng Yang, Shui Gui, He Wuya, and Yishir San to help you for the time being. You can contact me directly if there's any problem you can't solve. Yuan Yi knew that Zidane and the other four were selected to be Tan Xiu's personal bodyguards. They were the elites of the everlasting feast hall, and any one of them was much stronger than him. Therefore, the worry in his heart finally dissipated without a trace. Boss, with these 5 people staying to help me, I can definitely train these demons and monsters you brought out of Labor Camp 1319 into qualified elite soldiers of the everlasting feast hall. Tan Xiu patted Yuan Ye's shoulder and looked at the people who quickly lined up in front of him. Then, he said in a deep voice, let me introduce you. This is Yuan Yi, and he'll be the supreme commander of your stay on Clam Island. From this moment on, their orders are my orders, and you must obey them unconditionally. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Understood. Most of them respectfully complied. However, 2 middle-aged men in the team stepped forward with strange expressions. Who told you to come out? Go back. Mo stepped forward to block the 2 men and berated them. We have something to say, said one of them loudly. Tan Xiu narrowed his eyes as he looked at the 2 men and said, I don't know if you've undergone military management training, but remember this from now on. You must report to me if you want to speak, and you can only leave the team without permission. Both of you, come here. Mo indifferently glanced at the 2 men and immediately stepped aside. Killstrom and Stan Matthew were the names of these 2 men. As they came to the front of Tang Xiu and Yuan Yi, Killstrom said, We know this commander you just mentioned, boss. We've fought side by side with him before. We're well aware of his combat prowess. He's indeed very powerful, but there's still a gap between him and me. Since he can become a commander, I think I can too. With a strange smile, Tan Xiu looked at Stan Matthew and asked, Do you also have the same idea? That's right. Stan Matthew nodded without hesitation. We're Yuan Ye's friends, but we don't want him to be our immediate superior. Tan Xiu smiled and said, Yuan Yi, since these 2 friends of yours who fought side by side with you are not convinced and think that you don't deserve to be their commanding officer, shouldn't you say something? Yuan Yi knew the characters of his 2 friends. A confident smile appeared on his face as he strode toward them. He stretched out his arms and smilingly said, Killstrom, Stan Matthew, I thought you 2 bastards had died long ago. I didn't expect you to be alive and kicking in front of me now. After a manly hug, Killstrom let out a strange smile and said, We asked you to stay in the team back then, but you insisted on leaving. You even cut off contact with us all these years. It turns out that this is your lair. Now, I admire Boss more and more because even a guy like you is willing to be loyal to him. I'm from the everlasting feast hall, and I'm also Boss's man, said Yuan Yi. In my eyes, I'm Boss's man when I'm alive and my ghost when I'm dead. Stan Matthew grinned and said, Cut the crap. We'll catch up later, brothers. Since you want to be our commander, you have to defeat us first. Let me tell you, we're much stronger than we were back then. Yuan Yi raised his brows and grinned. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. I guess that you've become stronger, but in my opinion, the gap between you and me is too big. If you want me to clean you up, I won't be stingy. But remember, don't cry if you lose in the end. Cry your ass. Stan Matthew cursed with a smile and instantly launched an attack at Yuan Yi. His fists whistled and his moves were particularly ruthless. Nearly all of his attacks were aimed at Yuan Ye's vital parts. Killstrom didn't rush to act, but folded his arms and watched the fight between the 2 men. He was stronger than Stan Matthew, so he knew very well that as long as Stan Matthew could defeat Yuan Yi, he wouldn't have any problems. There was no need to compete anymore. Bim, Yuan Yi dodged more than a dozen moves in a row. Finally, he let out a strange laugh. In an instant, he counterattacked with a punch, bombarding Stan Matthews' chest. Following that, he whipped out his leg and hit the side of Stan Matthews' face, sending his head flying 7 or 8 meters away before heavily smashing onto the beach. I only used 30% of my strength. Yuan Yi grinned. Killstrom was dumbfounded. He never expected that Yuan Yi would directly defeat Stan Matthew as soon as he started his counterattack. What's more, he didn't expect that Yuan Yi would say that he only used 30% of his strength. Let me try. Killstrom instantly pounced and attacked Yuan Yi with both fists without any reservation. Yuan Yi smiled confidently and instantly put his right hand behind his back, only using his left hand to block Killstrom's attack. His footsteps constantly changed his position, and finally, after a dozen moves, his left hand directly caught Killstrom's incoming fist. Down! A lightning-fast kick instantly landed on Killstrom's chest. As Killstrom was sent flying back 7 to 8 meters, Yuan Yi's figure flashed. All the prisoners only saw a blur before they saw Yuan Yi appear before Killstrom. Old friend, you have indeed made some progress. However, compared to me, the gap is too big. However, don't be discouraged. Since you chose to follow boss, you will become as strong as me in the future. After saying that, Yuan Yi stretched out his hand and looked at Killstrom, who was clutching his chest with a pale face. After the other party slightly gasped for breath, Yuan Yi pulled him up from the ground. Tan Xiu faintly smiled and said, since you have been defeated, you no longer have the qualifications to stop Yuan Yi from becoming your highest officer, right? During the time you stay on Clam Island, you must obey his orders. Anyone who disobeys will be killed without mercy. Understood. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.